3 by 5 cards. All right. Who's not here? Charlie's not going to be here. One person. Who is that? There he goes. The guy
All right, birthday girl.
Everybody signed in. Magna's not here. Charlie's not going to be here because he's got his father.
And Cole are dragging in.
Anise and Cole.
4 years of dragging.
Typical.
And Daniel.
I saw Daniel out there.
Yeah.
I think I saw him once.
Which Daniel? Which night? C or C?
Yeah, where's Daniel Caballero?
C or Daniel? I don't think. We have one? Yeah, I was doing work last night, so like.
Anise, she's here.
I just want to.
You made your copy yet?
That is yours, John. That is yours brewing right now.
Is it? Good. That's right. Well, that's definitely my machine. Okay, everybody, so here we are. This is the first Saturday. I'm going to get to you guys in just a second, okay? So, for this first Saturday, our game plan is to essentially break up into our groups. 1Ls will be in here. 2 and 3s are going to be together with Andrew and CJ. Are they not going to be together? They're not going to be together. I knew that. Andrew and CJ will take care of you. And then the 4s, I think, are going to have a little Drucker time. What are they going to do until Drucker gets here?
Performance exam.
Veronica is going to keep you busy.
Yes.
And I'm going to stay in here with you guys for about an hour. And then you're going to have Veronica come in and tell you sort of the real nuts and bolts stuff, like how do you sign up to take the baby bar and all the little things that you need to know so that you don't have to worry about that somewhere down the road. And we will be working on our rule statements, and I will tell you how we're going to do that. And let's see, it's Lori and David's birthday, so there you are, David and Lori. There's no law school that has birthday cakes whenever Saturdays come around, so I want you to know that. It's a special distinction. Announcements, Irene, do you have anything?
Also, Veronica will be teaching you, or going through the steps of how to register as a law student. You're going to have to do that with the state bar. The whole process that you go through, a lot of stuff you have to provide to them. So.
You have to tell them that you're a law student, and then you have to tell them you're ready to take the baby bar. Telling you're a law student is really important because you have to do that, I think, within 90 days.
No, 30 days. Just
30
the
days?
end of this month. Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
But we're going to work you through it today. You start the process for you.
And
then we're going to have a lunch, or a lunch?
Yeah, we're going to have lunch together at 11:30. Hopefully we can get through that in about a half an hour. We're going to have our speaker at noon. Our speaker today is Nicole Ebar, who is one of our first ever graduates that passed the highest score on the baby bar and is now working for Julia Burt, who's an estate planning and trusts and wills lawyer. And Nicole has some interesting insights for you. And she'll be back with Doug, her significant other, Dr. Roger, who will teach you guys, or at least begin to teach you guys how to write essays. It takes a while before you ever get there. Hey, Magda. Hey, Daniel.
And our 2 4s just got notification that they passed the.
Yes, our 2 4-years got the MPRE exam. That's the professional responsibility you have to pass, because even if you pass the bar, if you don't pass that, you can't be a lawyer. So they are 2/3 of the way here. They got the baby bar, they got the MPRE, all they got to do now is pass the bar. Pretty easy stuff. And so, where's Veronica? There's Veronica. So tell everybody what they're doing on top of what I just said, because you know better than I do. I'm going to stay here with the 1L, so you come in here at 9:30.
Yes.
The 2Ls are going to go with
CJ.
CJ. The 3Ls are going to go with Andrew. And the 4Ls?
We'll do a PT.
You're going to do a PT, and then you're going to have Drucker look at it for you, okay? Everybody okay? So I I'm telling you, I still believe the secret of being able to be successful is to come here on Saturday and do this. Because if you're working, and most of you are, there's just no time to do all the things you have to do, so you have to be forced to do it. By the way, this whole schedule was designed on me and how I would not do things I should have done unless there was a time set aside to do it. So this is your time. This week, we're trying to get you geared up. So after our speaker, we're not going to have you stay, but this will probably be the only time we do that. Maybe there's one other exception, depending upon if it's Thanksgiving week or something like that, okay? So, anybody got any questions? Everybody okay? Okay, well, the 2s go into appellate, and the 3s go into the federal, and the 4s go over to the, how much was your cover?
The cover? Yeah, it was like, no, it was, I would say it was like 7, 8. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's at the Apple store. Yeah, that's right.
You're not hear this? We're done after the speaker.
No, after it,
Sure.
I'm just confirming it.
Do you need to get a ride?
Yes.
Tell them to be here at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay. Here's a little lawyer trick. The question was, when can we leave today?
Thank you.
And then I could say 1 o'clock, and you wouldn't have to ask about all the speaker or the lectures, right? You can leave at 1 o'clock. Or you're scheduled to leave at 1 o'clock. Okay, now, we're going to begin to do some things. Let's see, I need to put this on erase first, which is, let me put this and say erase all that. There you go. Now we're back. So, you see that little sign back there, the third over from the left? Thinking like a lawyer, writing like a lawyer, speaking like a lawyer, and then acting like a lawyer. That's our goal. So you have to begin with the thinking, and the thinking has to do with something different than almost any other kind of education. The right answer is not the objective here. The objective is the right kind of thinking. And that means whenever you have an opinion about how somebody is horribly, terribly guilty for the facts, what I want you to do is immediately go to, if I had to defend them, what would I be saying? Because it's really easy to say it's horrible for someone to kill someone. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. The question is, why were they killed? What happened? What were the circumstances? Is there a reason why they were killed? As an example, if you killed someone, that would be bad unless you found them strangling your significant other and holding a knife to their neck at the same time they were strangling, if there's a possibility of doing that. Then you might be able to kill in self-defense or defense of others, we call it, okay? So there's no real absolutes there, and then when I say that, I don't mean there's not principles, but it's the principles and it's the manipulation of the principles and understanding of the principles that is what we may need to learn to think like. There's one area where it requires memorization, and that is in the rule statements. And in the past, we've sort of let you learn the rule statements as we go along and eventually get to the point where you know the rule statements. I don't like that because we're fumbling around in May still with rule statements. So you know the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, you know how you don't have to think about that when everybody has you stand up and say it just comes out. You might be miles away intellectually and do that. Well, that's what you need to have on the rule statements. So I want to show you, first of all, and this is all about essay writing, okay? I mean, it has bigger context, but for right now, we're going to talk about essay writing. So remember what our format is for writing an essay. So what is I? Issue. And what are we going to try and do with issue? Anybody know? Boil it down to one word or two at the most. So if it's murder, it's not. The issue is, did Bob decide to murder Jane? It's just murder. All right? Burglary. Did Bob go into Jimmy's house? No, just burglary. Okay? So, yeah.
Are you explaining this specifically for credit law? Because I know, like in contracts, the professors want very long briefs.
Yeah, well, that's okay. Very long briefs doesn't change the fact that your issue is going to be very succinct.
Okay, what do you
Okay.
want like a
Offer,
question?
acceptance,
Okay.
consideration.
Okay.
Okay? So, instead of saying, did Bill make an offer?
Okay.
You write offer.
Okay.
Okay? So it's the same. Obviously, I want to talk about criminal law because that's
Okay.
my area of specialization. But remember again, this is for writing a legal essay. And ultimately, this is for writing for the general bar. And before that, it's for writing for the baby bar. And before that, it's writing for your teachers in criminal law. This is how we want it. If they modify this and say you should change your issue statement, well, do what your teacher tells you to do. But I know in contracts and in torts, at least for me, it's still down to one word. Offer, acceptance, consideration. There's sometimes there are two words like third-party beneficiary. Well, that's a concept. That's as close as you can get. So, for me, it's one or two words. Part of this is to clarify your thinking. What am I talking about? So when you read an essay, it won't be Jim murdered Bob. It will be Jim went into a bar. Jim got drunk. Bob came in. Bob thought Jim was another guy. Bob tapped him on the arm. The guy turned around and hit him with a beer bottle. So it's a whole bunch of stuff. But the bottom line is this a murder? Is this a manslaughter? Is this what is it? Okay. So the rule statement. I should have asked you if you knew what that is, but I'm pretty sure you did. First of all, it needs to be memorized so that you don't have to think about it. Once you identify an issue in an essay, you want to put down your rule statement very quickly. And X is is defined as, okay, so X is the issue. So assault is defined as, right? Battery is defined as, murder is defined as. Because we are writing an essay, we're not giving an outline. So many people make the mistake of giving us bullet points and thinking that that is equal to an essay, and you will fail on any bar examination if you just write down a bunch of bullet points. So even though it's right to have bullet points and know what elements are and all that, you have to write it as an essay. In the beginning, don't even worry about it, just say is defined as. So assault is defined as placing another in the reasonable apprehension of an immediate impending battery, period. Now you've made your rule statement. Then you're going to go to your factual analysis after that. So really important that we do that. Now, this is A is for analysis, I guess you would call it, of the facts, right? So here's how you write an essay. You write here, well, wait a minute. Let me change that for a second. As long as you're fixing this, I'll fix this too. Oh, put it back here. This is going to be analysis. So here's how you write in your essay. You've said, the question is assault. The rule statement is, assault is defined as placing another in the reasonable apprehension of an immediate impending battery. Now you go down to the next paragraph, which is, here, and then you go, fact, element. So let me give you a simple example. Mary swung a baseball bat at Bob. Here, the facts indicate Mary swung a baseball bat at Bob. So now you have the fact, right? Bob ducked and didn't get hit. The facts indicate Bob ducked and didn't get hit. It appears that Bob, therefore, was placed in the apprehension of an immediate impending battery, right? Because the baseball bat would have hit him, but it didn't, and he died, right? So then that's the conclusion. Now, every element has to have a fact. So you could either do element first, and then fact. But for right now, I'd like you to just stick with here, give a fact, and then say how that satisfies an element, okay? And then conclusion. Here's the big problem with people. They do a really good job on the issue, they do a job on the rule, and then they go directly to the conclusion. And they don't do analysis. And guess where all the points come from? Right here. If you had to break down points, you would say probably 10% for identifying the issue, 10% for giving a rule statement, 75% for the analysis, and maybe 5% for the conclusion. So it's different than most education where you're supposed to get the right answer. The right answer isn't as important as the analysis that's taking place. That's the part about thinking like a lawyer, okay? Now, I'm not gonna confuse you with how this gets a little more exotic, but you might have a situation where you write fact, element, and then there might be a defense. And you might write that too, but we'll worry about that a little bit later. So I'll tell you what I have for you. Last year, by the end of the year, we were sort of working together to come up with some rule statements. So before I give you these, let me look at the back for a second because I want to make sure there's some stuff that we covered. Yes. Can you tell me what's the definition of assault? Okay, so everybody together. Assault is defined as placing another in the reasonable apprehension of an immediate impending battery. So just break it down. Placing another means you can't assault yourself, but you have to identify who was placed in the reasonable apprehension, right? If you just go around swinging a bat and there's nobody in the area, there's no assault. Can't be an assault. Now, what if there was 27 people in the area and you're around swinging a bat? We'd have to figure out, was it close enough for anybody to be assaulted or not? You can't assault a crowd of people. It's sort of an individual thing, right?
Would you consider those elements?
That's what we're talking about, is elements. Every one of the definitions we'll go through has elements. So the first element is placing another. Now, in the beginning, I suppose you might go through all the elements. Some of them merge together. So, Mary swung a bat at Bob, where you can say Bob was placed in the reasonable apprehension of immediate pending battery because if he hadn't ducked the bat, chances are the bat would have hit him or something like that. But just for the beginning, placing another reasonable apprehension. Why is that important? What if you swing a bat and the person is 30 feet away? Well, it's a question, isn't it? Does that mean they're afraid they're going to get hit with the bat if they're 30 feet away? Well, you'd have to think about that and say, well, if he's coming at them and he's swinging the bat back and forth, maybe yes. If he's standing there 30 feet away and not moving toward them, maybe not, right? All right, reasonable apprehension. Immediate impending battery, what does that mean?
It's about to happen.
Right now. Right?
Yeah,
Pretty simple stuff. So if somebody says, I'm going to hit you with this bat next week, right? It's not immediate impending, right? So why this is important is this is just an example of how all of these things go. In criminal law, in the torts mostly, it gets a little more exotic in contracts, and then things change as you go along. But essentially, you can do the linear analysis of elements. So assault is defined as what? Okay, so can everybody say this? Assault is defined as placing another in the reasonable apprehension of an immediate impending battery, period. Okay? That is your first sentence of a rule statement when your issue is assault. And once you've defined that, you have now identified the issue and you've given the rule statement. After that, you have to break it down, and you shouldn't have more than 2 sentences, maybe 3, but mostly 2 in any paragraph. Because you're gonna say, placing another, and then you're gonna discuss that. Musical apprehension, you're gonna discuss that. Immediate impending battery, you're gonna discuss that. And if you do that to begin with, if you learn that system, eventually you can build on that, and you can get a little more sophisticated. But essentially, that's it. And then, therefore, it appears, that's your conclusion, that Mary could be charged with an assault. Now, remember what we said the other night about how you have to look at the call of the question? The call of the question in criminal law is usually about the same. It's usually what charges can Bob be, or what charges can be brought against Bob, or whatever, or what charges can be made against Bob. Now, sometimes they'll screw you up, and they'll say, discuss whether or not the described conduct of Bob is an attempted murder. And so you look at it and you say it's an assault, but the question's not asking you if it's an assault. So you wouldn't define assault necessarily, you would define attempted murder. And I don't want to get too, out there with you, but I just want to tell you, you have to answer the question. And so the call of the question is repeated in the conclusion, okay? You understand what I'm saying? So the call of the question was, what charges could be brought against Bob? Right? So you say, well, the issue is assault, because Bob swung a bat at Bill and Bill ducked. What is the statement? Assault is defined as the reasonable placing another in the reasonable of an immediate impending battery. And then you're going to analyze the facts. Here, this is what happened. Here, this is what happened. Here, this is what happened. And you have euphemisms. The facts indicate, it is indicated. Here is just a way to begin with. Then you're going to say, therefore, Bob could be charged with assault. You don't say what? Bob is guilty of assault. Why don't you say that? Anybody know? Huh?
Guilty, and since it's proven guilty.
No. You weren't asked that. You weren't asked if he's guilty. You were asked what charges can be brought against Bob. You get that? This is so, believe me, people are in their second semester and they don't get this yet. I don't want to hear Bob's guilty if the question was, what can he be charged with? Right? So people seem to think once you do an analysis, you're going to say somebody's guilty. We're not looking for guilty. We're looking for what can he be charged with. Now, they'll get more sophisticated and say, Bob committed an assault. Is there a defense? Right? So you'd have a very short description of it's a given that Bob committed an assault. And the question is there a defense for that? Right? And then the defense might be self-defense. The defense might be defense of others. And that would be your issue then, self-defense, defense of others, whatever. You get it? But yeah.
Would that have to be then reflected in finding facts, the analysis of the facts?
Yeah, every issue must be analyzed in terms of the facts. That's all that a legal essay is a bunch of facts, 4 or 5 paragraphs, and they will make a gray area for you. So maybe it's a self-defense, maybe it's not. Maybe it's an assault. Maybe Bob was looking the other way and didn't even see the bat. So that's the kind of thing that's done.
Well, so your role would be the defenses to assault are this, and this? Or,
No, it would be self-defense. And then self-defense is defined as.
Okay.
And then you would write another one, defense of others.
Okay.
And defense of others is defined as. So each one is going to be its own IRAC. For right now, everything is its own little set of IRAC. So never mix two things.
Okay, so that's a more complicated
well, it is. It's hard to write an essay when they say there's 3 defenses to this,
right.
1, 2, and 3. Instead, you just do 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
And look, eventually you can get more sophisticated, but you got to get the basics down first, okay? So, what is the definition of assault? Without looking at your notes? So stand up now, because this is what we do in court, and say, assault is defined as?
Assault is defined as.
That's good, you got the first part, now what?
placing someone in immediate and
Another.
immediate and pending
in the reasonable
apprehension
apprehension of
danger,
immediate
immediate and pending danger.
battery. Okay, you'll get it. So,
Sorry, mornings are so bad for me.
it doesn't matter, this is the same for everybody, and I want you to know there's no excuses. So you're gonna know this, and you're gonna know this because we're gonna make you do it so many times, it's not gonna be hard at all. It's gonna come out because you have it. So what I'm giving you, you have to look up assault, it's in here somewhere. These are all the definitions by the end of the year, so you don't have to pay attention, you can read them if you want. Here's an example. Attempt. Attempt is defined as a direct but ineffectual act or the completion of a criminal offense. I learned this 40-some years ago, and I can say it in my sleep. And so you don't have to worry about attempt right now. We're not even going to get that till the second semester, I don't think. So let's take a look here and see where assault is in this business. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to make your own outline, and I want you to start with assault. So take an 8.5 by 11 on your computer or on a piece of paper. See, on the second part here, it says assault is defined as placing another in the reasonable apprehension of an immediate impending battery. It says in the reasonable apprehension. I think in the reasonable apprehension is better.
What does
So-
that parentheses?
Huh?
I guess parentheses.
Well, that's because it's general intent assault, et cetera. Don't worry about that right now. Just for you, assault. The reason why it's a general intent crime is because you don't have to specifically intend to hit somebody in the head. If you just swing a bat towards their head, you're committing an assault. We'll get into what's general intent, what's specific intent. I'll give you a little preview. There is a specific intent kind of assault. It's called attempted battery. And the reason is because every attempt is a specific intent crime. That probably means nothing to you, but don't worry, by the end of the year you'll know. So if you swung a bat and someone ducked, that could be an attempted battery, right? Or it could be an assault. The reason why this is important is because general intent crimes don't have certain defenses that specific intent crimes do. Like if you're really drunk and you intended to batter someone, the fact that you were voluntarily intoxicated could go to your mental state. If you just committed a general intent assault, it doesn't matter. If you're completely drunk, it doesn't matter. It's not a defense. So don't worry about that. We'll get more sophisticated later on. So here's what you need to do. You need to take an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and you need to put on the top rule statements. And the first rule statement you're going to put in is your rule statement. Assault, underlined, and then dash. Assault is defined as placing another in the reasonable apprehension of an immediate impending battery. So you can do this on a piece of paper, you can do it on your computer, you can do it however you want, but this is the beginning of your outline. So that your outline, by the time we get finished, will have all this stuff. That will be in the order that you learn it. And Dean Steadiness actually put in our syllabus now her game plan on how we're going to go through all this stuff. Let me see if I can find that real quick for you. I thought I had my syllabus here. Yeah. So she has, I think she has assault in our first week. Okay, am I not finding the syllabus? I'm finding the syllabus here. Who has their syllabus? Oh, here it is. And you see, then next week we're going to have battery. And the next week we're going to have larceny and robbery. We're going to accelerate that a little bit because we had larceny this week, didn't we? So your first rule statement is assault. And what is assault? What is it? Renee? Stand up. Assault is what? Is defined.
Assault is defined as placing
Another.
Another in a reasonable
In the reasonable apprehension.
reasonable apprehension of immediate impending battery.
You're getting better, see? So everybody, I want everybody to just say this in the mirror 100 times at home or whatever, okay? And this is not to give you a hard time. This is to say this is the only memorization you have to do. And the only reason we do this memorization is so then we can hold up any facts that are presented to us to the rule statement that we're given. And we don't have to think about for 10 minutes, wait, was that assault again? attention. I want you to just lay it out on the page, because then you will save all kinds of time. So what else? Did we have larceny, or at least you have the beginning of larceny? Wasn't that in your book? I think I was here. Yeah, it was.
No, I think you talked about it, but it was
It
not.
was in your reading, and it showed you the elements of larceny, right? Look in your book, look on the page that talks about elements. I think it's on page 3. Let me find it for you. Is it page 3?
It was the people's version.
There you go. Look on page 3. Do you have your book?
No, I only have my choice.
That's okay, it's all right. You don't have to bring your books on Saturday because we're trying to do this stuff so you get it rather than have to look at the book. See right here, it says the elements of a crime. And we talked about that in the first hour the other night. And it said, as illustrated, the definition of the crime of larceny consists of 5 elements, right?
Oh,
The
yeah,
taking, carrying away, personal property of another with the intent to permanently deprive, right? So the next definition you're going to put in your outline is larceny. Larceny, underlined. Larceny is defined as the taking and carrying away of the personal property of another with the intent to permanently deprive. Now this definition got a little bit shorter because they didn't put the part about intent to permanently deprive, which is a mistake, so you should write that on your little list here. But I'm repeating myself, but I want to make sure you get this. When you get to the end of this year, you don't need this list anymore because you have your own list and you have been working with it since day 1, okay? Because like I said, and I'll say it again, you do not want to be fumbling around with rule statements when you're writing a 55-minute essay. You want to spend time, probably 10 or 15, maybe even 20 minutes, reading the essay. First of all, you look at the call to question, absolute first thing. Then you read the story to see, with the idea in mind of what you're looking for, like what crimes should be tried, what crimes are in here. And you might make notes on the page, and then you might read it again. And then you're going to make an outline. And this is going to be very frustrating because you want to start writing, but you make an outline for about 15 minutes, and then you look over the thing one more time, maybe 20 minutes, then you write. And if you do it that way, you won't miss anything, because the readers, just so you know, when they're reading for the baby bar or even for the big bar, they look down the left-hand part of the page and they say murder, larceny, burglary. And right away they know, okay, you saw the issue, you saw the issue, you saw the issue. They might look at your role statement. Burglary is defined as the breaking and entering the dwelling house another at nighttime with the intent to commit a felony therein. And they might look at that. And then they may look a little bit at your analysis, but they're really looking at, did you see the issue? Have you defined it in a way that's reasonably okay? And then if it's a teacher like us, we'll be looking at your analysis very carefully. The readers have 2 minutes to read a 1-hour essay. And so they're just concerned that you didn't miss something. And so if you didn't get the part about the burglary happening before the murder inside the house, you're going to really eat it. They're going to take a red pen and check this. So we're going to stylize the way we write so that it looks like IRAC. So when we see your page, it's going to go I'm just picking ideas out of the air, but do you get what I'm saying? And then you're going to have rule statement, factual analysis, conclusion. Rule statement, factual analysis, conclusion. Just like that. And when these guys read your papers, they're going to say, and this is going to be, in the California, we call it people in the state of California versus Bob. Most people write state versus. That's how your paper is going to look. And if your paper looks that way and it's easy to read and it's easy to go from one thing to the other, they'll check the boxes. This really has very little to do with you actually being able to think like a lawyer. But the reason why this is important is you have to pass the baby bar exam before you can continue to your second year, or at least continue after your second year, because you get 3 shots at it. But I'd like you to get all done at the first shot and not mess it around, because you have to do it again in October, and now you're in your second year classes, plus you're getting ready for the baby bar again. But if you don't do it then, you're back in June and you've already finished 2 years. And the penalty, I'm sure we told you this, but the penalty is if you don't pass it by the 3rd time, you have to start your second year over again when you finally pass it. You don't want to do the second year twice. There's a few people who have. They do get better at the second year subjects.
If you guys get accredited, do we still have to take the baby bar?
You do. Not because the bar requires it, but because we require it. Because we're a 4-year program, and to be honest, the original reason for the baby bar, just so you know, was consumer protection. They didn't want people to go pay for law school for 3 or 4 years and then have not a hope of ever passing the bar exam. So they instituted that. Well, the side benefit, the unintended consequence is we look at this and we see if you cannot pass the baby bar, it's really not fair to have you continue to go, because you're no way you're going to pass the 13 or 14 subjects if you can't pass 3. I mean, that's just not right. So at least for right now, my intention, not that I am the king of the law school, I'm just sort of a prince. Irene is the queen. We want people to take the baby bar because it forces you to know how to write a legal essay. Once you learn this at the end of this year, it does get a little more sophisticated, but really it's the same process. And so you got to learn the process. And so learning the process has to do with, is that my coffee? Thank you. I'm only having coffee, not that I haven't had any, right? Is that right? No, I think that's right. You have to have a lid. Okay. We want you to learn the process so that you don't have to be fumbling with the process. Because when you become a lawyer, guess what you do? When people call my office, you know what I want to hear? And I know it drives people in my office crazy because they want to tell me the story. The story is the A part, right? But what is it? What are they charged with? When do we go to court? Right? Because if somebody's going to tell me a 30-minute story and then say, oh, by the way, he was charged with murder, that doesn't really help me too much. Because I'm a lawyer and I've got all kinds of cases going. What are they charged with? It's the first question you want to ask. Well, that's I, right? And then when do we go to court happens to be the practical part of, are we going to do something about this? And then I'm supposed to know the issues. That's what a lawyer is supposed to know. You're supposed to know the issues and you're supposed to know the rules, right? And if you don't know the rules, let's say you get a weird case like a bigamy. I mean, you don't see many bigamies very much anymore. You might have to go open up the penal code and read what bigamy is, because it'll tell you right away what bigamy is. And then you want to know the story. And the story is, all we're doing when we write a legal essay is we're doing what lawyers do when they sit in their office in the chair and somebody comes in and says, this happened and that happened and this happened and that happened. Well, that's the same as an essay saying Bob hit Mary with a beer bottle and whatever all the way down. Your job is to pull out of that, what's the issue? What are the rules that we have to follow? What's the analysis? What are the defenses if there's any in there? So you're learning the process of thinking like a lawyer. You have to learn the process. And it's not easy, and you will find that your people around you will react to you because eventually you'll be asking them to get to the point. What is it that you're asking me? Not just give me a long story. I mean, it's, look, people live in stories. Their whole life is about telling you the story. But if you're going to be a lawyer and help them get a result, you need to know what's the point of the story. So that's what we're doing. I mean, that's all this is when we put up an issue is this is one of the points of the story, right? And then here's how that kind of issue is dealt with in the law. That's the rule statement. And then the story becomes relevant because the story is where you pull out the facts, depending on whether you're on the prosecution, the defense, whether you're on the plaintiff or the defense, what things you have to be able to use in order to get to the point of coming to the conclusion. Let's write down larceny too. So you've got assault. And what is assault again? Can everybody say what assault is? Assault is defined as? Okay. So we'll just keep doing it. I know this is ridiculous, but I'm going to tell you, once this is over and you got this and you don't have to think about it, you are way ahead of the game. There are people that take the baby bar that have never done this, that take 5 minutes to figure out what the rule statement is. They're never passing. They're never going to get an essay written in 55 minutes. You have people that go to the baby bar that sometimes you can study in the judge's chambers or a lawyer's office, but more likely it's either an unaccredited school where they'll allow people to come to a law school, but say part of your provisional admission is that you take the baby bar. If you don't get taught how to do this, and that's from, I believe, from day one, you're done. You can't go on unless you pass this exam. So as sophomoric as it seems, if you just give me the time to memorize this stuff, and literally go home and take this, and you can read it in the mirror in the bathroom, or if there's nobody in your house, you can read in the mirror in the bedroom or whatever. Just do it. And then you have to put it down. You can read it 20 or 30 times, then put it down, and then remind yourself, did you do it right? Did you do it right? If you just do a little bit of this every week on top of all the other business we make you do, you'll love it. Now let's write down larceny. No, you'll thank us in the end, and you'll say, my God, that was so easy to do that exam because I didn't have to worry about my real estate. So larceny. Larceny, remember what we're going to do, is defined as the taking and carrying away of the personal property of another with the intent to permanently deprive. Okay, so let's write it down again. Can you say what it is, Renee? Larceny is defined as
Taking.
the taking.
Sorry, the taking.
This is a complete sentence of the taking.
Larceny is defined as the taking, the carrying away of personal property of another with the intent to deprive.
Almost perfect. With the intent to take the personal property. So think about the elements now. And I know, again, this is real simplistic, but if you get this down and you get this process down, when it becomes more complex, you can easily maneuver. The taking. So is there a taking? If I found the diamond ring on here and I held it up and looked at it, am I taking it?
No.
Well, depends. It really does depend. There can be things as little as when you pick it and move it up, it's taking. Depends on the facts. But probably a good argument could be made, I'm just looking at something. Maybe I'm trying to figure out who owns it. Maybe my intention is to give it back to the owner, right? So you have the taking. That's taking personal property. Remember, this is not real estate. It's only personal property. So personal property is movable. So that's an important thing to remember. It's movable, right? So you take it and you carry it away. So what if I picked this ring up and I looked at it and I walked out the door? Is that carrying it away? Maybe, maybe not. See, this is what I want you to get. No, you don't say, yes, it is. You say, well, it depends, doesn't it? What if I'm walking outside because I know it's Irene's ring and I'm just going to hand it to Irene? Then am I carrying it away? Well, sort of and sort of not. If you're intending to return it to the original owner, you could say it's moving it, but unless you're carrying it away, and of course, remember the elements have to be all there together. Taking and carrying away personal property. We know it's personal property, got that down. With the intent to permanently deprive, right? So in order to be a larceny, all of those boxes have to be checked. You got it? So it could look like a larceny. I picked up the ring, or if I picked up the ring and put it in my pocket, and now I walked out. But when I walked out, I went over to Irene and pulled the ring out and said, here, I think you left your ring. Is that do the facts support intent to permanently deprive? So unless you have all the boxes checked, you don't have a larceny. So you might go down the list then and say, issue, larceny, rule. Larceny is defined as a taking and carrying away of the personal property of another with the intent to permanently deprive. Is there a taking? Well, it was picked up and moved. Was there a carrying away? Yes, walked out the door. Was it personal property? Yes, it was personal property. You know, it was a ring, which seems to be personal property. Or if you want to do this, you say, here the facts indicate John picked up the ring. Here the facts indicate John carried the ring outside of the courtroom. Here the facts indicate that the ring was not attached to anything, it's movable, it's personal property. However, for the element of intent to permanently deprive, it appears from the facts that John gave the ring to the rightful owner. Therefore, there is no larceny. right? So you've just gone through all the elements and then you've made a conclusion. Now that sounds very simple, but I can tell you, you have to get the simple down first, and then it'll get more complex. And I'll just give you an example of how it can get more complex. What if Irene owed me $1,000 and the ring was worth about $1,000, and I walked out and said, this is your ring, I know it's your ring, but I'm gonna keep it because you owe me $1,000. Well, there's a defense called self-help. There's a defense called retrieving personal property. It's an interesting question. Now, let me change the facts for you. It's a $100 bill that I wrote my name on, and I gave it to Irene because she was going to do something for me. She's going to drive me to the market. And then she left the $100 bill on the table. So I picked it up, I carried it out there, and I told her, I'm taking this back because you didn't drive me to the market. It sounds like a larceny, but if it's the actual property. So here's a little distinction for you. This ring's worth $1,000, I gave you $1,000, therefore I'm keeping the ring, is probably not going to be a good defense. This is a $100 bill I gave you, has my name on it, and you left it, I picked it up and brought it back, but I'm gonna keep it now because you didn't take me to the market, is probably a defense because it's retrieving stolen property. So you see how that could get a little more complex. But complex can't come first. Complex has to come last, somewhere down the road. So now, what is the definition of larceny?
Larceny is defined as the taking away, the carrying of the personal property of another with the intent to deprive.
Taking, carrying away personal property of another, intent to permanently deprive. Okay? So they make another be an element, I don't know. There are actual, what they call mens rea, mental states, and there are acts, actus reus, they call it. Those are the two most important elements usually. Sometimes there's more than two acts or more than two, there's only one intent usually. Then there's these ancillary elements like personal property of another. I mean, the another is important because if it's your property, then you can't be committing larceny, right? But it's not really an act. The taking is the act, right? The carrying away is the act. Intent to permanently deprive. So you've got the act and you've got the intent. That's really the operative element, but then there's some ancillary elements in there. So why is this important again? Because you have to know these rule statements cold. And we want to start early this year. We've never started this early. We've talked about it, but we've never said, you got to memorize this stuff. And I just think it's so important. Now look at this is not the polar opposite. It's just these things are divergent and then they come together. You have to think about stuff, and that's what we do in class. We want you to get the concepts in class, but I don't want you to miss the boat here. You can be really smart, but if you can't spit it out and put it on paper, you're never going to pass the exam. Okay? So we have assault. What is assault? What does everybody say the assault is? Assault is defined as the reasonable apprehension of immediate impending battery. So you're getting pretty good. Larceny is defined as the taking, carrying away the personal property of another with the intent to permanently deprive. Now, I sometimes think, you guys probably think I'm crazy to make you do this, but I want you to know it just cuts down on your anxiety when you have your rule statements cold. So we have two this week, okay? So you can, if you wish, what time is it? You got plenty of time. You can, if you wish, start memorizing other statements in here. But I would recommend that you hold off on putting these on your own personal outline until we go over them. I think, isn't battery? I think Sue has battery for next week. So let's just do it. Let's get a little bit ahead. She'll probably be mad at me for this. Okay, so what's the definition of battery? And this is an important thing because so this is a good example of the definition of battery in torts and the definition of battery in crime is about the same. You can do some things, and I'll show you in just a minute how to do that to sort of let you know. But how would you know in a legal essay whether you have a crimes or a torts question.
Call the question.
Call the question, right? You get what that means? What crimes can Bob be charged with? Well, that's a criminal essay, right? Is Jim liable for the injuries of Mary? That's a tort, right? So this is another reason why we look at the bottom of the question. Literally, people have written an entire essay without looking at the call of the question, and they wrote it as though it was a tort, and it turned out to be a criminal question, or vice versa. You're dead. You can't go. You don't have time to go back and rewrite it or change it. So we really want to begin right at the bottom. What's the call of the question? So battery is defined as the harmful or offensive touching of another without consent or privilege. So that's another one you can put in. So battery, battery is defined, every one of these, battery is defined as the harmful or offensive touching of another without consent or privilege. So what's harmful touching? Punching somebody, pushing somebody, hitting them with a bat, right? That's all battery. What's offensive touching? What if you spit on someone? No, you grab their crotch.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, it could be not that harmful, but if you spit on someone, that's a battery, right? So I can't think of any besides spit. I suppose you could do that. Yeah, exactly. That's a little bit of both, right? That could be. So the harmful or offensive touching of another without consent or privilege. Why is that important?
It's like a doctor, yeah.
Well, that could be because there may be a privilege, a parental privilege, right? Although that seems to be less and less as society evolves. How about a boxing match? You're beating the crap out of each other, and there's consent, right? So you can't call a guy. Now, good example, Mike Tyson bites Evander Holyfield's ear off. Is that exceeding the consent?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, can you see how that? So can you see how you can argue things back and forth, and then you can say, well, is it? As soon as somebody says yes, it is, then I want to say, well, what if it wasn't? So is there some rule? I suppose there probably is, which is you can't. I mean, the rules of boxing. You know, you can't pull out a knife in boxing. That would exceed the consent. You can't bite somebody. That would exceed the consent. You're not supposed to stick your thumb in their eye. That exceeds the consent. But do you see how that's why we put without consent or privilege? You have parental privilege, and you have potential consent. So how do you know that it's a criminal case instead of a tort case? Call the question, right? Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah.
Good. So that's a big part of it. Now, you want to modify this definition? You can if you want to. So you could say the unlawful and harmful or offensive. Because when you put unlawful, then you know you're talking about crimes. I would put that in parentheses just so you know that it's there and implied. So you could put battery is defined as the, and then put parentheses, unlawful, harmful or offensive touching another without consent or privilege. That helps you to know that that is a criminal definition. When you're writing an essay, by the time you get to the baby bar, it takes too much time to write unlawful. There's all kinds of crimes that are unlawful, felonious, and all this crap. When you got a criminal question, you just need to write battery because, you know, what charges can be brought against Bob? Write battery and do it. But if that helps you, because anytime it's unlawful or even felonious, that means it's criminal for sure. So now you have 3 definitions. When you come to class on Wednesday then, we're going to talk about battery. And, you know, the philosophical part of it, I think of you every time I go to the philosophical part, okay? Why is this a crime? Right. We agreed that it was a crime, right? Through our representatives, we agreed that it was a crime. Is it malum in se or malum prohibitum?
If we say it, then it would be prohibited. But we would think that it is, we're saying it because it's malum in se.
Right. It's malum in se because it's just wrong to go and hit somebody, isn't it? It's wrong to kill somebody. It's wrong to hit somebody. It's wrong to take their property, right? So malum in se, it just means in and of itself, it's an evil or a wrong, and we all recognize that. Malum prohibitum, what would be a good example of that?
Not paying a fine.
Not paying a fine would be a good one. What else? Civil infractions, but what about felonies? Making meth. Is that inherently bad? You could say that, but no, if we just say it's wrong, right? We agree, we say we prohibit the making of meth. We prohibit the possession or sale of drugs, right? Because meth is probably a bad example because it's sort of artificial, but somebody grows a bunch of marijuana. Back in the day, that was cultivated, it was a felony because we said it was a felony. The good thing, or the interesting way of seeing this is, can you see how malum prohibitum means it's because we said it was, and guess what we did? We said it wasn't now, right? You can't change that. You can't say murder's okay now. It used to be not, but now it is. Or at least that would be a very hard thing to do. And I'm not talking about the exceptions of during wartime and self-defense and all that. You get it? So that's important because it's in the multi-states, when you get them, they might ask you a question. You know, which of the following is a malum prohibitum crime? Or which of the following is a malum se crime? And it's a small thing to know, but it's an important thing to know because it's a big part of criminal law. And that also goes to intent, and that's what we have to deal with, this ridiculous model penal code, which I can't stand. And we'll have you learn it just because you have to have it for the multiple choice questions. Nobody uses the model penal code. They made it up in 1954 or something, I forget. And it's just so that if you were a new state or you wanted to change your penal code, you could look to this as a guideline for how you might look at it. And when you get a little bit further down the road, you'll see there's different ways of looking at intent, which are pedantic. I mean, they're important to know, but they're, honest to God, don't have any application, anything in the real world. We just have to learn it because there's some questions about it. So, okay, we have 4 minutes now because I'm going to finish at 9:30 because I'm like, okay, everybody stand up. Put your notes down. Assault is defined as start with a P. Placing. See how good you are now? Now what's larceny? Larceny is defined as
Taking, carrying away personal property of another who's within Right.
and why don't we try battery now? Battery is defined offensive. Okay, try it again. Battery is defined as So you now have 3 rule statements that you can work on this week, and you can. So you have your outline, so it's going to be rule statements. So when you come to class, bring this nice piece of 8.5 by 11. Was it wrinkle in the paper there? And you can have how are we going to write our rule statements? Complete sentences. Larceny is defined as, assault is defined as, battery. So that'll be the first page of your outline that you will have. Now let me give you just a little quick preview. When you get to some of the issues, like conspiracy, we'll talk about the definition of conspiracy. Well, every conspiracy you're going to talk about the Pinkerton rule, which is that the act of each individual conspirator is imputed to every other conspirator. And you'll also have withdrawal. What if you got involved in one to rob a bank and then you said, I'm not doing this, you let me out of this. Every time you have a conspiracy, you're going to have withdrawal and you're going to have the Pinkerton rule. Every time you have assault, you're going to have an analysis of whether or not this is a general intent assault or a specific intent assault. But don't worry about that right now. Right now, all I want you to do is have a completely accurate statement of what is an assault. Assault is defined as What is a larceny? Larceny is defined as what is battery. Now, let me just tell you two other things that are important, because we will reorganize your rule statements. What are assault and battery? What kind of crimes are those? Huh?
Intentional?
Intentional. Intentional is good. And
A good person.
against a person, right? What is a larceny? This is a property crime. This is a personal crime, and this is personal as well. So sometime we reorganize when we get to the end of the year and we say crimes against a person, crimes against property, crimes against habitation. What are the crimes against habitation? Anybody got a guess? Huh?
Damage to home.
Well, burglary, right? That's breaking and entering the dwelling house of another. Arson, burning down somebody's house. Well, that's important because when you sit down to write a question at the baby bar, you want to calm yourself down. One of the ways you can do it is say crimes against person, crimes against property, crimes against habitation, and then start looking and say, oh, there's one there. Oh, there's one of those there. Oh, there's one of those there. And you might even use that as a way to organize yourself to do a little IRAC for each one. So I don't want to get too far ahead. I don't want to freak you guys out, but I just want you to say, if you could just come back on Wednesday and have a pretty darn good capability of giving us these 3 rule statements, you've really done well. And that's really all I want to do. I don't want to wear you out, but eventually, and we're a few weeks down the road, we're going to have you start writing essays. When you start writing essays, you have this down. We're not going to give you an essay on something we haven't covered in class. So if you have an essay that has an assault and a larceny in it, you're way out of the game. If you can recognize the assault, recognize the larceny, give me a rule statement on assault, rule statement on larceny, okay? All right, now, I'm a little bit late. Questions? Anybody have any questions? I want to make this so simple that it's hard to have a question, but do you have a question? Anybody? Okay, so can you come to class with a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with 3 rule statements on it? And can you see if you can get those rule statements under your belt? Now, nobody's going to punish you if you don't have them under your belt, but I would like you to try to do that. And the reason is, again, and I'm repeating myself because repetition is the mother of all learning, I don't want you to have to think about this. You shouldn't have to think about what's an assault. You should just know it. And that way you see it in the essay because of the way the facts lay out, you define it, and then you use the facts to show it either is or is not an assault or a larceny or whatever, okay?
Are you gonna collect it, or is that just for us?
It's for you to have. I want to look at it.
Oh, you.
Yeah.
So this doesn't suffice. You want to?
It could suffice. Eventually, are you going to use a laptop to take the baby bar?
If I.
You don't have to.
If I need to, I can. I don't really.
Well, here's the deal.
So you take the
It looks
outline
better.
with you?
Huh?
You take the baby bar? Is that what you?
Say
you
what?
take it with you?
Your
outline?
laptop?
No, the outline.
No.
Oh.
No. When you take the baby bar in your laptop, they'll put you on you'll have a software called ExamSoft. And when that's brought up, you can't access anything else on your computer. And so you'll have the question that's usually on a page, on a actually hard copy page. And then you'll go question 1, and then you'll put torts or whatever you want to do. And then you'll write the question. So you don't have access to it.
What about for the midterm? You guys.
For the midterm, we'll do the same thing. We have ExamSoft here and we'll use the same software. We want you to be able to be comfortable. When you take, believe me, when some people take the baby bar, they never saw ExamSoft before. Well, it's got little quirks to it, little goofy parts. Sometimes it doesn't cut and paste like it should or whatever. If you practice it numerous times, and this is the last thing I'll tell you, everything that we do on Saturdays is designed to get you through that baby bar. When you have an exam, when you have a midterm, you're going to have 3 essays and 60 multi-states, and you're going to do them on your computer. Or you can write if you want, but if you're going to plan on using your computer for the baby bar, you got to practice on it. And when we have finals, it's 4 questions and 100 multi-states. I heard, I don't know this for true, but I heard that they're going to start putting the multi-states on the computer as well through ExamSoft. They've always given us pages, and you just sort of, what are those things called? Scantrons, yeah, you do those things. They're talking about putting those on the computer because it's easier to crack that way. So I would, if I were you, unless you have a real problem using a computer, I'd start using it right now, as fast as you can, and I'd start keeping your outline on your computer. But for this Wednesday, if you have it on your computer, just print it out. And if you don't, make a copy, because I want you to keep your copy. I just want to look at it. And because I could make a little tiny correction for you, and then you go back and correct it yourself. And then as we build on this each week, eventually you'll have this outline of yours, and then we'll expand it to add certain things, like when you see one of these, be sure and discuss this issue. Attempt is a good example. All attempts are specific intent, because it's an intending to commit a crime, and so you do an intent. Well, there's two things you want to discuss: preparation, perpetration. Preparation means I'm getting ready to do some crime. Perpetration is I'm starting to do it. And you have to discuss those two things and use those two words whenever you describe an attempt of any kind of crime. So eventually you're going to have a big old outline like this. It's going to be yours because you constructed it, and it's going to have all the things you need to know about rule statement and issues to look for within those rules, okay? Anybody have any other questions? What's an assault? Assault is defined as reasonable apprehension of an impending bad, right? I know you're gonna go crazy with me because I'll keep making you do this, but eventually you won't even have to think. All right, I want to get Veronica now, because she's going to come in and tell you some of the nuts and bolts, like you have to register with the bar to be a law student, and eventually you have to register for the baby bar and a bunch of other stuff. So hold on just 1 second.
Do we get a 5-minute break?
You can if you need to go to the bathroom.
I just want.
All right, good. I'll give you take 5 minutes, and then you'll have Veronica. I'll tell Veronica you've got 5 minutes.
Not fast enough.
I think I'm gonna be studying this every time I just get in trouble. I'm just gonna have to. Like, if I can't quote what your offense is, then I think you don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
Don't play along. What? You got that wrong. They'll call me out every time I get something wrong.
How many kids do you have?
In my house now, I have 4 now. 4. Yeah. All boys. I try to get away with it.
Did you have a female?
Oh, no.
females?
No, you mean female children or like
Yeah,
wife?
female children.
Neither. No, I at one point I parented for about 2 years. One of my
Oh.
older kids, younger siblings, and he had a sister and a brother. But she didn't physically. I had all legal rights over her, but she physically lived with a friend of mine only because I have boys and
Yeah.
they're close in age, and I was like, you can't have any middle school thumping happening behind my house.
Yeah.
But now she's back.
You'll be dreaming about assault now.
And so the 20-year-old has no desire to go back to mine. Like I thought when he turned 18, he'd go back. But I can't see him living more than a half a mile away from me. His entire life, he's quite honest. Like, he's very connected. So, at least I know how somebody takes care of me.
Yeah.
Okay, Veronica will be right here.
Started readings.
I tried to start last night, but I've been trying to organize myself so that
Because I try, it's like what would work, what, yeah.
I know. You know, I tried doing that like the first. You know when we got our books.
I started reading right away and then I forgot the whole thing, so that was not a good idea for me.
Yeah. So then what I did, like for the criminal and like
The last two.
the contract, the last two, all I did was I read before.
I read
And
it, yeah,
then-
exactly. Yeah, I have read before and I'm like,
Yeah, there's
but then
so
it
much
helps
stuff.
when I read the same day, then
Exactly. Yeah.
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
I make everything a game. If you haven't noticed this, like everything in life is a game.
I don't
So like my kids, their school is like an hour, 15 minutes from our house.
Oh.
And so I'm like, it's too far for me to drive them to school, drive back home,
Yeah.
drive them to school. So I was like, what can I do all day? I was like, I can study. But then I was like, well, how can I make this fun? And so I decided to start Ubering. And so I dropped by school. So I read in the periods of time that I did an Uber thing. But it's all like it's all like game. It's like so you hear the thing go ding, and you're like, oh, I get to go Uber. And then they get done, and I just stop like a block from their house, and I sit there and read.
Yeah.
And so like I don't know, I know it's all really crazy, but
That's
it's actually
that
quite
makes
fun.
If it works for you, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever works.
And so now, and at first my kids were like, we're so embarrassed. All of our friends are going to think we're broke because you're Ubering.
Oh,
But now they're like really excited. It's so like they get in the car and they're like, what did you read about?
Yeah.
I'm like, so I get to review myself by talking to them. They're
Right.
like,
Trip to trade trip in just a minute. I'm gonna be passing out one of these, just fill out one per person.
okay.
For the state bar certification, they ask all these personal questions. So, and I have to fill out statistics for them. You need a pen?
Doesn't matter what color.
Oh, anything. I'm just gonna transfer all that information onto my master, yeah. So I'm gonna give one to everybody. And it's just for, don't pass it around, just one per person. And I have the ethnicity options on the bottom. You can
And I
pick
haven't done
wherever you are. LSAT,
LSAT.
TBD. Just to be determined. You're scheduled for what, October?
October, but I haven't.
Due right away
I
because it's still young.
The
Yeah.
10th is the deadline.
Yes,
10th is September.
it's at October 26th, or do you have
It's the
it?
20.
It's on a Saturday.
Yeah, so
Be sure
It's
not,
on midterm, so
can't do that in the midterm.
then I shouldn't register for that.
Try to see if we can do a different location maybe.
Because that's what I noticed. That's why
I saw it on the 26th.
I was holding on.
Are you registered for the 26th?
I did, but like,
We'll find out, let me find out from John because we might have a separate midterm. That means you would have to come in early.
So that's why I was like, I'm gonna ask.
Yeah,
I was
because that would
about to,
definitely
and then-
throw you off.
Yeah.
We would have to just redo, just offer you a
I'm
different.
looking it up.
Okay.
So what is this there?
This is, it's a form that I'm giving to all of you. I need to have you fill this out, just your personal information. State Bar requires this for the certification process. So I have to submit all this to them. They're asking me what degree you got. I have your sex in there unless you're hiding something in there, I don't know, which is none of my business anyway, but then your ethnicity and if you have an LSAT score, if you're going to be taking it, and if so, what date you schedule for.
So what's the latest I can take the
It's the
LSAT?
October 28th.
But, well, it would have been October, so let me find out because that is midterms.
Mhm.
And,
You don't need the LSAT grades to go, so fine.
It's like,
pardon?
You don't need the LSAT grades to fine.
You do. You have, if you can show me confirmation that you're going to be taking it for the semester.
there's a November 25th date.
Oh, wow.
It says.
Yeah, do your,
So we can do it on, I can change to November 25th.
okay, yeah, that's gonna be
That's the closest.
Thanksgiving weekend. Isn't it?
That is Thanksgiving.
I mean, it's up to you.
Well, October 20th.
Yeah, that might
It's
match
October
up.
28th.
Did you get this?
Okay.
October 28th, okay, that's better. It's on the Monday, no? October 28th. You're in such. Why didn't it
Are
say
you in
26th?
19, are you in 2019 or
It's
2020?
2019.
So it's October 28th?
That's a Monday.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. That's fine, that way you don't have to mess
Miss
up.
the
It's
midterm.
not, I would try and reschedule it for you and do what we could, but
It's just
it's
better not to.
important, yeah, to try to be here in this environment and put yourself through the rigors of taking your first midterm, because it's all in one day, and it's getting you ready for beta bar.
I thought it was fun.
I saw that on the 26th, and then I was checking it again, and it said 28th. So I don't know if they added another date.
Are you saying?
Who you are?
It says Monday,
Thank
October
you.
28th.
And,
And then
your
what's the
and
disclosure?
this,
What, did you say there's something in November?
Monday, November 25th. It says disclosed test. What does that mean?
is what?
It says disclosed test in parentheses.
I don't know what that means.
Okay. Currently, after they disclose. They say the LSAT currently discloses 3 tests per year. After they disclose the test taker.
Oh, they're gonna disperse the scores, I guess?
I think they give you that test afterward. Like, they say after they disclose the test, it's never administered again. So they-
Right.
So,
Then they have to get new questions. and things.
okay. So, yeah, November 25th is what's over here, but I'll stick with October.
Yeah.
Because that's one of my free weekends.
Oh, I have a trip October.
I'm doing it like today. I was just thinking about that.
So with the non-disclosure and disclosure, like they'll send you, they'll tell your result in email, and then I think after like 2 months for the information. And on the disclosed, I see everything I did right and wrong. The non-disclosed, they just send you the score, and that's it.
So do you want it helpful to see if you got it wrong?
Honestly, no.
Okay.
I think I got through like only 5% of it, like looking at what I was.
Thank you.
So we're gonna take it in 28. Have you
28.
taken it?
Okay. Okay, so the purpose for me today is to go over, and I hope I put that in the email, is for you guys to, is to get you guys to register as a law student with the state bar association, okay? So you guys will need to log on to your laptops. And we're gonna start your process today. We want you to create your account, okay? And we want you guys to have this done by the end of this month. And I'm giving you the fee is about $160 to register. Okay? So you guys can start you log on to the state bar, and we also attached to you, I already went in there and kind of created her dummy account to kind of get an idea of.
This is what the screen will look like for you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put my stuff in there then.
Do you need a laptop?
Can I use my phone?
Yeah. Okay. We just, no one leaves this room, Irene said, until you create your account.
At least the first part.
But it's all lowercase CDTA 2016 $.
And you can see it ampersand.
What about the other one?
This is a very keyboard I can see.
What was the password right here, the AMI 1, 2, 3 maybe?
CDTA 2016 money sign.
All lowercase?
All
Yes.
lowercase CDTA.
That's it? Thank you.
Just go to, that's directly admissions.cal, or you could just go to the State Bar of California and then click on the admissions tab.
Click on which tab?
It should say the admissions. You didn't take them for the from the very beginning, but that's the direct one, admissions.calbar.ca.
Creating a new registration? That's plenty
Yes.
more.
Yeah, create an account.
Register as a law student and return the app.
That's it. Can you find it in there?
Yes, I'm at that first page.
Okay.
Create an account.
And then you'll put your first name and your last name and then create password. You can put your email address and your password. You just apply and it gives you all the different,
Yeah, they have it. So they're making sure.
and for your ID number that you're gonna put in there, just use your social security.
The only thing you'll need is your first name, last name, date of birth.
Oh, I don't know what's happening, I don't know why, I don't remember, it says it won't let me register because I've already registered, I don't recall that, I don't know why.
Was there a reset in the very beginning?
Go to.
I have no idea, I have no memory of doing it, I certainly didn't do it also, maybe I was looking around on something, but I don't think I would have done that seriously.
Then I think we have to go back to the pictures. Go back.
Okay, that's weird.
It might also ask for some of your education, and if some of you don't remember dates exactly,
Forget your password.
Yeah.
everyone has access to your transcripts if you need them.
Okay, your username. And then just.
I don't remember even doing this.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, like the apply,
Oh,
They put my email in
yeah,
there?
forms?
And then if not, just call the state bar, tell you don't remember, setting it up, and then we'll let you go further.
Registration
I
application.
have no idea, I guess.
yeah, registration application should be there.
Launch
Since she's
application.
already started hers.
Launch application. Oops, something went wrong.
Oh, I just refreshed it.
It's just okay, I don't remember, I mean, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
that's okay. If you can't get through it, call the state bar, tell them that you tried to register and it says you're already registered, but you don't remember doing it.
I mean, I think they may have my email address, but I
That
never
would be
set up
it,
an
you could be
account.
quick, you could change it,
Right.
so you have a separate email address.
I do, but I'm gonna use this one, so we'll just do a password, and that's fine.
Okay, and then you can always change your email, it'll give you that option when you get in there.
So we want you to at least get as far as you can. I'll give you guys about 5 more minutes. We just wanted them to create the account and make sure you get in there. Because you can save it and go back in, log in and finish it. But please make sure you get this done by September 30th, okay? So it is now 9:51, so I'll give you till 10:59 minutes.
Are we special students?
Are you already there?
Okay.
Some have some, some people give it
Or
is.
ABA.
Oh, yeah, I don't even know what the CLEP.
Wait, no, no.
Veronica,
Yes.
so I guess I corrected that issue and I've changed my password and I'm fine, so now I need to go to apply,
Yes.
view form.
Mhm.
And then just register. Oops, something went wrong.
Yeah, some people got that. Me too.
Yeah, this is what I'm seeing on my phone. It like won't let me click anything, it's like double.
It happens
How do you?
with their, this is their new.
I try to click on it and it just refreshes like that.
Yeah, it's. Let me turn it.
Oh, let me look again.
It's trying to squeeze everything. It's their,
Oh,
see,
oh,
it's the way they're trying to fit everything into your model. Imagine trying to register for the bar on the last day and I was getting.
So what'd you
upset when
do,
they switched it.
To fix it?
Yeah, you see how it's combining, it's overlapping, so all I did was start,
I have a file number.
I'll look in
I
there.
don't remember.
but flip it. Flip it and it'll spread it. Yeah, so it's not overlapping, so I'm not doing that. Good night. While you're doing that, I'm just gonna give you a quick tip, is, I know the Bay Bar seems so far away, but it's gonna come so quickly. So, my tip is whatever laptop you plan to use for the Bay Bar, if you don't already have it, you wanna get that as soon as possible, because you wanna start getting used to that laptop throughout the year.
do you need a laptop? Can we not get this by pencil and paper?
Are you a faster writer than a typer?
Well, I mean, not that I'm a faster typer, I think I'm maybe the same, maybe I write faster, but I'm able to, I do better
Same with me.
when I'm
On
writing.
paper. I get stuck in digging
I-
back.
I'm so for laptop. It's faster. It just depends on you and how you feel. You could do both, yes. You could do, actually, it's almost cheaper to do by writing, but you
I'd
have,
rather be writing, so.
so you
I
can
think
practice.
it's a lot of money to register your own computer, right?
It's about an extra $250 maybe to use a laptop.
Computer.
So you'll, I think we had 2 people who were writers in the very beginning. And at the end, or by the second semester, it was only 1. And 1 was Doug. And you can probably ask him. He will be here next month with Doug and Nicole. And he's the doctor that, and he didn't learn, he didn't know how to type. He didn't know how to type, but he knew that writing was not for him. From me. And so he learned how to just type and he typed. I think it's just easier to cut, copy and paste and move things around, but you're gonna be learning and practicing your approaches from here on. So that's what you're gonna practice on Sundays on your writing.
Oh yeah, the cutting and pasting, I see how that could be quicker instead of erasing and writing nothing.
And the way it looks and the way you present your paper to the reader as well.
Can we write and do the computer? It's one or the other, right?
You can register for the laptop, and if your laptop fails, you're gonna be forced to write.
Right.
But you can't go the other way. You can't register as a writer and you get tired, then one day you're not gonna want
What does NPR mean?
MPB,
It says NPRE.
you have, it's,
I don't know what that. You know, like, what is it? I'm just editing my profile. They had my name in my email, but that's all.
you have not taken that.
Oh,
That is just what the orals took and they passed.
oh, I see.
It's your professional responsibility.
On the uploading of the valid passport or driver's license, what do we do then? Do I need to take a picture of it or?
Possibly,
But I have to do that later, so come back to
you
you.
can do that later. We just wanted to make sure we created your accounts
Okay.
and made you aware. Like, today's what, September 7th? You guys have about 23 weeks to get it done.
What proportion of the people get to the 22nd week and are like, I just remember to do that? Sorry.
So we can basically go and build this in our spare time.
Yes, you have 3 weeks to get it done.
Does that include the moral character?
You're not gonna, you're,
I'm way ahead, okay, thank you.
What did you say we have to upload a passport or government ID?
he said a 90 or something.
Well, it just says, if you do not have a you do not have a social security number, you may still register by these 3, which is uploaded.
Oh, okay, so you don't need it mailed in if you have a valid social security number.
Oh, okay, okay.
And you said special student is none or no?
None. Oh, we didn't see that, no was an option, if it is free, you can. You look stressed, baby.
Yeah, I'm having trouble uploading the school information.
Is there a CEB code?
What?
It says CEB code, manual entry.
I don't know what that means.
Like, does this, I took it as a law school hat.
Is there another, is that the schools?
Well, like, it couldn't find, because this was previous education, and like, it couldn't find NYU, which, so it brought up, one of the brought of that. So, in Columbia, which is weird. But then the other thing, when I like tried, where was it? When I was trying to see the school listing. And see, there's no way to scroll down on that part, to see what's listed. Yeah.
How do we enter the school information? How do we enter the school information? Like it says that you've been in school for at least 2 years.
That's
So what I'm using now.
So yes, and then they tell how we have to do.
Have you done that for pre-legal?
Not pre-legal, but I mean, like on the 2 years of school, I gotta read them.
No, it says pre-legal, right?
Have you applied with the pre-legal education requirements for admission to practice law by completing at least 2 years of college work? Does that mean any college work, or does it mean just like pre-law work?
I'm getting,
I get the name tag.
right, but this, okay, so I'm gonna put it for the student journalist, which is university.
That just means you make,
This gives you valid application.
I'm probably all involved in.
New York.
Well, unfortunately, I need to keep you guys on schedule and you guys can play with that. But my job is done. I got your pre-year account. You guys can get started. The next thing I want to quickly cover with you guys is you guys all have your comprehensive calendar. Again, the baby bar is June 30th of next year. We want you guys to start planning ahead, okay? So figure out what you're going to do come May and June. If you're working, you're going to take time off, when you start taking time off, and so forth. You need at least anywhere to be ideally 4 to 6 weeks to study for the baby bar, okay? This is information that I'm giving you. I gave you the second handout on the first year examination. You need to also budget the registration fee for the baby bar. I'm told it's about $777 with the laptop. So it might be less than that, okay? And I'm putting in there, don't forget, you still need to sleep somewhere, your hotel, your gas, and your food, okay? So all that, that's not part of the 775 that I'm budgeting. The good thing is that you guys are, is that an extra? It's a 1 day thing. Oh, this is for your other registration. The one that you just got right now. Yeah, one's for the law student registration and the other one is for your baby bar information. One says 160 on the top, deadline 9:30, and the other one says it's more or less.
I have the same.
Wait.
Oh, did I grab yours? But I don't have the other one that you're mentioning.
That's it. Did I give it to you?
You gave it. Okay. Oh, she has the same thing. She's gonna need another one.
Oh, that's why I'm so confused. I'm like, wait.
She needs the 170, the 775.
Yes.
Are you have that?
More. Did everybody have extra?
What do you have?
Yeah, this is what you need too.
Okay. I have these.
Oh, you have them. Sorry.
I was like, I know it.
You got it? No. Here.
I mean,
I didn't know that.
on the side, but I
I
can't.
didn't know there was another.
Oh, I just heard a student that's gonna say, oh,
Here.
there's one person.
Yeah, there's, yeah, one person is in charge.
I'll leave these.
Sorry, it's okay.
So here's just some basic information for the first year on. Again, you can go to the website, the SABR website, and go through there and see it. But what you are to expect, I think I attached it. This is what you get. You prepare, and you're gonna get tested. You're studying 3 subjects right now. Contract starts criminal law. You're gonna be tested on 4 essays. We don't know which subject you'll get 2 essays on, okay? So, this is my favorite year because this is the one that passed back. I think I have yours. So, this is the year that I took it. And I passed it. So this is what you get to, and you just prepare and you show up. And the first one that I touched the first time out is what you're gonna get. Right now, what I'm passing out.
You have 2?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, I only get 3. So that is then the second handout that I just gave you, click. That's the full answers with the full model answers. They will always give you guys 2 answers, an answer A and answer B. Okay, those are people who scored possibly one of the highest students. Those are the how they select them. Okay, it's a lot of stuff, and you guys have never seen as much paperwork before. I mean, it's law offices and stuff like that you do, but it's just there's more to come, and it's a lot. It's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, and if you weren't an organized person before, you become one, or you better find a friend who will. Okay.
So when we take the baby bar in June, this is the sheet that you're talking about for us to pay
Yes. you're
gas and
gonna-
everything? Where's it at?
You will be taking it in Pasadena.
Oh, okay. So we should be in a hotel, not just drive there and check.
Yes. Oh, yes. Nobody is driving there the morning of. Okay. You're all gonna get there the night before.
Oh, yes, you should do that.
Right.
Okay, you're all getting there the night before.
No, but I took my marriage and family therapy exams and I would
So,
say this is nice.
Start getting your calendars. I'm gonna give you guys all comprehensive calendars. Figure that out. If you're working, figure out your working schedule, what's gonna be like in May. I unfortunately couldn't take time off, but I started slowly, because you're gonna finish here, May 4th, May 2nd? So ideally you wanna take maybe a week off, gather yourself and then start. I started June 2nd because I couldn't leave work, but I was studying half days.
So you study, you said half days,
I studied about 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks for the work.
and like 6, how many hours?
We're gonna give you guys,
Did you put into it
that's your
every day?
job every day.
Did you pass it the first time?
That's the year I took.
You're gonna have to give us a lot of tips.
You're gonna get a lot of tips. Okay?
When are we supposed to apply for the baby bar?
You will start applying in April or May, because you have to get certified from the school.
And you guys will remind us
She'll
and
remind you,
stuff like that?
yeah, because you have to pass and get certified before she takes them to them. And then you do it. Okay, so now I'm gonna talk about other stuff that you guys are gonna get. And again, everybody is different, everybody studies different. You guys have many students out there that are all happy to help you guys and give you guys, there's so much advice you guys are gonna get. What might work for one of you might not work for the other. Okay, you guys, you're gonna figure it out. I mean, you will, okay? You might think, there's so much going on, I can't even bring it together, I don't have all the information. We will give you all the information. You might have too much information, so you need to figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, okay? So some of your syllabus from the professors talked about the Gilbert outline. These are here and these will remain here in the classroom, okay? These are all 3 for all your 3 classes. Criminal law, contracts, and torts. The only time that I use these were if there was really something that I really couldn't get and I would come in here and figure it out. You can copy this section or so forth. The law hasn't really changed. You can go online on Amazon, eBay, or whatever and find your even older versions of them. $10, $15. They're worth it.
What are those
These are the
cases?
Gilbert outlines.
Outlines.
These are in-depth, detailed outlines. Okay? This is black letter law. You're gonna hear that a lot. These will stay in here, so if anybody ever needs to use them, you're welcome to. Okay? I just wanted to make sure that that's referenced. Now, you would have received this, we've changed that this year, you would have received this the first day of school. This is Fleming stuff. I just wanted to kind of give you guys a quick preview of it. Okay? So, okay, so baby bar, you're gonna get the 4 essays in the morning, you're gonna take lunch, you're gonna come back and you're gonna do your 100 multi-states in the afternoon. That's 3 hours. 4 hours in the morning, you take your lunch break, you come back for 3 hours of multi-states. Okay, so you're gonna get more than enough, you're gonna be prepared. It's just a matter of making sure, you know, you're that you're ripe for it. You know, we don't need you guys, you need a 560 to pass. You know, if you get 540, you get reading. Okay, reread. You get sent to another reader to read your paper in detail. You're gonna learn all about that. Doug and Nicole are gonna be here, she's gonna talk about the Doug and Nicole across the room test. And that's this, can you make your essay look presentable from far away? Don't make your reader read it.
So these are just examples.
No, this is an actual answer that was posted. This is what we were tested and these were the top 2 answers.
That's what I mean. So it's an example of what's gonna be there and what it
Yes.
should look like.
Yes, fine. So, one of the other things that you guys are gonna go through is a writing workshop, okay? You're gonna get a book, you're gonna learn how to write an essay, how to write in law school, how to write these answers, okay? It's gonna be overwhelming, you're not gonna understand it, but do it. It's really, you're gonna do that here, okay? We'll give you those dates. And if they're not already in your comprehensive calendar, you will get them. That's the writing workshop. Okay, then, but this is what John said, you're not gonna receive until your 2nd semester. Okay, because he's working with you right now to prepare your rules, your professors, you know, are gonna be giving you rules. But that's what this is. These are your outlines for Fleming on all 3 subjects. That's what you're gonna get from him. Okay, and then you're gonna get, these are all student answers. So when the baby bar people that just took the baby bar, you get your answers back. They get them graded. So all these people turn them into Jeff and he provides you with all these student answers and he'll tell you this is what a 70 looks like. This is what a 75 looks like. You know, and those that we publish are probably what, 80s, Trevor? 85s, 90s? You know, you can't get published for less than 85, right? On a score?
You have to get at least an 80, on baby bar, you have to at least get an 85 and you have to pass.
To get published. So this comes in handy because to me it was like, okay, what's bare minimum? What can I pass? And so this was, and you're gonna all get this, okay? You're gonna get essays. And then we'll talk about what you guys do, how you guys get through that. And you're also gonna get them in CD format. Okay, so what I did is I took these and I uploaded it to my iPod car, left these in my car and had them in my iPad and had them everywhere. I lived on them.
Will we get that too?
Yes, you guys will get that. Not till January. And then to prepare you for the multi-states, you're gonna get Jeff's Fleming book on multi-states. You're gonna get the Emmanuel's book on multi-states and the Finn's on multi-states. So you guys will be more.
No excuse.
No excuse, right, Rocker? So this,
A lot of stuff.
Yeah.
that is a lot, but it's all there. And again, so that's what I'm saying. Don't go out buying the Gilberts, come and look at it here first. You don't need to go out and get anything that you don't need. Talk to your other classmates out there. Talk to the people, because we always stress and you guys will hear. And right now I'm not scaring you, I will scare you later as to why you want to prepare and pass the first time and not have to do it while you're doing your 2nd year. Okay? Any questions?
Is there a reason why they changed it to January for us to see those?
I think they wanna concentrate on you guys understanding your rules first before you can write. Okay, so we don't want you to go out there and get overwhelmed as to all this other stuff that you see, and then you just start learning slowly by it's more than enough time. Don't go like, we need it now. Okay? My class, we didn't start that until March, I think. So it was more than enough. We did it that majority. Our whole class except for 2 passed the first time. And then they passed. Really easy. Okay, so you guys, a lot of stuff again, but prepare right now. Okay, and use every resource that you have right here, and every walking body in there is a good resource to use. Okay? That's all I have for you guys. I think we will have Drucker now, and he is not exactly sure what he's going to go over it, but I will tell him what you guys just got. And I think the reason for our success, we tell him all the time, but we don't think he believes it. For our class being so successful on our first try is because we had him. He dedicated everything to us. And he's the one who taught us how to write. He told us how to do the essays, how to issue spot, and what to write, how to get in, how to get out. We would sit with him and go line by line on essays, and he would teach us how to pull out the issue, you know, and stuff, and how to organize things. So, very valuable person to have here.
Is that with the finance part of it, or?
No, this is just his own greatness in him. So, he one handout that I will go and get that I've read to bring in is how to brief a case. He's going to go over that. That's in general, and he can possibly go over and outline a quick approach on contracts as to what you can expect. What is the overall picture of contracts? What is your overall picture of torts? What is your overall picture of criminal law? Okay, that'll help. How to brief a case. Again, you might go into general, but go according to what your professor wants on their briefs. The particular way they want you to brief a case in class could be different. They might be moving things around. They might want less facts, more on the roll, or a lot more facts, you know, stuff like that. But follow your professor, but this is more general. Okay? Do you guys need a 5-minute break before he starts? It's 10:16, 4 minutes.
Can I run to the
You go for 10:40.
Thanks.
I'm gonna go give you that handout, okay?
And do you need the whiteboard marked out, or do you want the other whiteboard?
Just the regular.
The right whiteboard that we rolled in.
Oh, no, you just. Actually, almost use it.
Really? That's my whiteboard. I like.
I only call silent every, 20 minutes now rather than every 5.
You don't have to go bad enough. If you get over the tissue, you're like, crap, there's no bathroom to take. These are things my parents are crazy, and now it happens to me, and I'm like, it's just nuts.
Okay. Okay, well, I am gonna have to close that. There you go. Drucker had 2 students who were inquiring as to whether it's easier or better to write the exams over typing. So, I know you were a writer and Rusty was a writer, but I did tell them about Doug converting from a writer to a typer. Yeah. So, yeah.
Where did it have to be research? So let's see how it goes. Danielle actually was the first time.
She was a writer?
She actually wrote it. She's
I'm slow, but I'm much slower.
right.
Right now it's so you have them until 11:30. Okay, that's why enough if you go over like your contracts approach overall.
Yeah, I think I want to do the briefing thing.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Get
go
the
over.
most out of it, yeah.
I'm gonna go over that.
For the law school date thing, do they anticipate it today? Or wait, that's it.
Yeah, which.
Mr. JD.
Eating Drunkers, sir. How are you? What are you, is this next year plan? What are they making people work? What are they doing? Good. Giving them rules-based memorization and I write. But feel free to build on that.
That's good.
You know, message,
I'm good. It's showtime. It's the one word. All right, well, good morning, everyone. And let's see, where are we today? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and how was week one? Did anybody drop out? Not yet. You're this loud. Okay, I'll take that for today.
It's very educational.
That's not bad.
For me, it's a feeling out process because I wasn't quite sure some of the expectations. The actual first class, which is why I'm glad you're here now. I kind of wish this would be like the first thing we did. Because being able to get an idea about the Greeks and what they expect the first day might help me and somebody else.
I think I wasted a lot of time, a lot of hours doing kind of the different ways. Right, just,
Okay, anyone else have any comments? That's all very relevant to me. I mean, if it helps you at all, I mean, I broke down in tears 3 times during my first year. So I read the book 3 times, just thinking that no mortal human being could do this, and that they were picking on me. Thank God I got over that, but nonetheless, but the first year of law school is pretty difficult. That would be my opinion. And of course, in my day, it was even worse. Certainly at some point, I'll tell you some stories about my school. But anyways, with that said, which I've never given them a penny in alumni funds, just so you know. In fact, given the opportunity with burned down the main building. So there you go. And spend years in jail and be happy about it, probably. Anyways, with that said. But one of the things though about the first year is a lot of it is about the struggle. And even though you feel like you could be doing better, you can and you will. But it's really, really important that, like for instance, if you feel you're wasting time, much more important to figure out why. You know, much more important to figure out how you're going to get better. Much more important that you always leave some breadcrumbs for yourself to follow so that you don't make these mistakes in the future. Because that we can't teach you. You see what I'm saying? We can throw stuff at you all day. We can tell you the law, we can teach you the law, we can give you examples, we can give you rules, we can fill in the blank, give you books, we can give you smoke signals, we can write in the sky if you like. You can hire a plane, I guess it's theoretical, you know, Iraq, you know, that for you. But what we can't do is we can't teach you to think logically, and we can't teach you to think critically. And critical thinking is what you have to do in law school. Critical thinking is the type of thinking that, at a minimum, requires a evidentiary base before you say anything, right? And I know it may sound funny, but you know, unless you're a very rare person, myself included, you know, you don't think critically until you go to law school or get some other training about how to think critically. We just accept way too much in life on face value, not even for our own good. But that's basically how we do our lives for the most part. Then you come here and we say, well, that's not good enough. Because when you're in a court of law, there's not a whole lot I can tell you about what goes on, but I will tell you that as an attorney, nobody cares what you think. Nobody cares what you think. So let me give you hint number one. If you ever are in a courtroom, never say to a judge, I think. If you say that, the judge will say back to you, I don't care what you think. I care what you can prove. If you have nothing to prove, then get out of my court. And I've heard judges say that to attorneys. Me, no. I was too smart for that one. I've had them say other nasty things to me. Not that one. Yeah. So that's it. When you're an attorney, nobody cares what you think. What we care is what you can prove. If you don't have evidence to back up what you're saying, you're in big trouble in court because you will not go anywhere. You will lose. Right? Eventually, you will have no basis to be there because you can't prove your case. You can't prove your case, you are no lawyer. Right? There you go. So think of that when you're doing all this, is you have to get used to that. You have to become, you know, adapt to that and then become adept at that. You know what I'm saying? That's what you're really here to do. When you leave this school, I will argue to you again. You will kind of see me on the way in, and then you kind of see me on the way out in your last class. And what I'll tell you is the same thing I'm telling you today. It's like, see, I told you, all we really did for you is taught you to be critical thinkers. And then you'll ask for your money back. That's the way it is. Seriously, that's the gift of law school, is becoming a critical thinker. But we can't do that for you. You see what I'm saying? All we can do is we can inundate you, we can surround you, we can try to beat you into submission if you like. But you know, if we're throwing pebbles at you and you're just rock, they're just gonna bounce off, right? And that's bad. So be open to change. You will have to change or you will sink. That's the way it is in law school. And that's why most students, it's not so much that they run out of time, it's they don't spend their time wisely. Spend too much of your time resisting, you know, that's what's going to happen. You know, I got news for you, you don't know better. I didn't know better. Why isn't this easier? Because it's not. I mean, what do you want me to say? Right? Okay, so we good? Oh boy, big threats. All right, with that said, then, so what I'm here for, and again, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them for you. Just stop me whenever you want to. You don't need to wait to the end. You don't need to do any of that stuff. And in fact, I highly approve of questions in class. Better that all of you hear it at once. I actually don't like answering the emails because then I end up answering it 7 times. Your class 8. Because then someone says, you said. Ask me in class next time. That's too bad for me. So, you know, so asking for the benefit of everyone. Because one of the other things I will also tell you, and again, it's up to you, is that the school that I went to I went to the University of Louisville back in the day when it was just a law school and one other program. So it's come a long way since then, billboards and all that stuff. That was hardly when I was there. But it was a pretty good law school back then. That was the thing. It really wasn't that. So, and went there. And it was not the type of environment that, as most law schools at the time, that fostered cooperation among students. In fact, we were basically pitted against each other like gladiators. It was not unusual at my school to have assignments given to you. Remember, this is 1990s, so everything wasn't online yet. Okay, I spent a lot of time in the library with books. Not unusual for books to disappear. Not unusual for certain pages in books to be ripped out. This is the type of school I went to. I was, cheating scandals were very common at my school. Most of them were false, trying to get students thrown out. That's the school I went to. I'm here to tell you, up to you, but notice that we don't rank you here. We don't really care. All you get is if you are the highest grade of something or other. I do that. Gave that years ago. You get like a bag of chocolate coins. Pretty exciting. Yes.
Can I ask a question about the grades?
Sure.
I heard that it's very rare for people to get A's. Is that true?
There's no such thing as an A.
Yeah, why?
Well, the actual reason is
Yeah.
because part of our mandate is that our grades must reflect in some manner the grade that you're likely to get on the baby bar. It's actually in our rules. We can't change that.
Okay.
And so if we don't do it, they actually will change it for us.
Okay.
And you are actually you would actually be in danger of losing your grades and your crediting. So a passing grade on the baby bar and the bar is 70. Okay, so you don't think of it as A, B, C, D. Thinking of it as pass or don't pass. So really, in many ways, you're better off thinking about getting as close to 70 as possible. So if you have like 69, pretty good. 71, great. Occasionally, I don't know what the other students, professors do. I do know if they give you a 90, they get a call from me. And I say, why did you give this student a 90? And whatever they say, I say, well, if they're not going to be on the Supreme Court next week, you need to stop doing that because it's giving you a false impression of where you really are. You will not get a 90 on the bar or the baby bar. It almost never happens. It's so rare, it's unbelievable. So you're not really, better off to do that. On the other hand, to stay in good standing at the school as well, because you only need to average 60 classes. So when's the last time you went to a school that a D was and kept you in the school off of probation? So again, we have a skewed way that we do things because the bar, but again, we can't change it. If we do, we're actually doing you a disfavor in many, many ways. So I personally never had a problem with grading at my law school. I was either invited back next semester or I wasn't. I didn't really care about anything. If it does interest you, my class was 24 students. I was number 13. I thought that was just fine. Couldn't care less. I was always astounded I was that high, because I worked all day. I worked 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-hour day. I started going to work at 5:30 in the morning so that I could be out by 3:30. And then 3:30 I would run across. I went to, fortunately for me, I went to law school, I don't know, about 10 minutes from my job. And I would be there usually by about 3:45. And I would be in the library up until 6. And my class was from 6 to 7. That's what I did for 4 years, basically. So what was I interested in? Was I interested in being the class valedictorian? Turned out to be married to a judge and had no job during the day? Or was I interested in survival? I was interested in survival. So there you go. I never worried about stuff.
Well, I'm just interested in putting my GPA on my resume, but not, yeah.
Oh,
It's gonna
don't
be
worry
low.
about that with law school. I mean, the only school that gives you A's is Stanford.
It's Stanford's on pass fail.
Hmm?
Stanford's on pass fail.
There you go.
Yeah, they don't get you
They don't even want to know.
Yeah.
You don't want to know what you're, when I pass, and again, in many, many ways, don't get me wrong, but law school is, you don't really take any tests in law school. What you do is you have a series of quizzes. The only 2 tests you will ever get over the next 4.5 years are the big bar and the bar. Because if you don't pass those 2, you will have a JD, but you will be no lawyer. So those are the real tests. You want to be a licensed professional, you must pass the bar. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how smart you are, it doesn't matter what grades you got, it doesn't matter fill in the blank, you will not practice law. So you're here to make this a interesting or scholarly endeavor, so be it. Take your JD and go home. But if you want to be a practicing lawyer, you got to prove it to the state that you are worthy of the title of lawyer. So really, in many ways, these are all quizzes. I don't know about you, but even in undergraduate, I didn't care about quizzes. Right? But those are the 2 big tests. So again, my advice to you during the first year is learn as much law as you can. That's my advice. Take the time, not to think how am I going to get through the least amount of effort, but think how am I going to get the most out of it. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, is things that I think will help you get the most out of your first year. Make it a little bit easier. And again, I'm always very systematic about things. So I'll try to show you how I do things and how I teach other students to do them. If it helps you at all, also, my first class that I taught in law was in 2001. So I have a lot of gray hairs, mostly because of people like you. And I think I have some common sense ideas that I'll pass on to you. Again, your first year, as with all things, is what you make it. If you want to make it a horrible experience, feel free to pile all sorts of crazy things on your back that really don't matter. Students do it all the time. So remember, argue for your limitations, and they are yours. Right? I would like to think we'll be successful. Now, on that note, just so I can help circular here, I also, because we don't rank you and things of that nature, I suggest you work together. Okay, again, I'm not the best person to talk about that because my school was so bad that I actually never was in. I was in a study group for 1.5 days and then decided I couldn't stand any of the people and they drove me crazy. And for the next 4.5 years, basically, I was like known as the badger in the bag. In other words, don't bother him, he's just going to swipe at you. Just leave him alone. That's how I got through law school. But that was a different school. You guys have the opportunity to work together. That doesn't mean having other people do your work for you. But it does mean that you can work collaboratively. And there's no reason not to because you are not ranked. It doesn't matter. You can't gain anything at the school except a bag of chocolate coins by being the first in your class. It doesn't matter. The first and the last, your JD still says what? JD. Who cares? Nobody knows, right? Nobody cares. Let me ask you a question about grades, by the way. Do all of you have a doctor? An MD? Just out of curiosity. Raise your hand if you do. Really, you guys still have doctors. You can get a doctor. Seriously. Anyways, with that said, when you do get your doctor, or if you have a doctor, have you ever gone into your doctor and said, what did you get in kidneys? Okay, no one's going to ask you what you got in law school either.
The person hiring the doctor might, though.
They're not going to care. Lawyers do not care,
Okay.
but just so you know.
I know.
They don't.
Oh,
Yeah, that's the least of them. I interviewed many, many people for positions in law firms, and honestly, I never cared. I I mean, they love to tell me about it, that's for sure. But it doesn't matter, because when you come out of this school, although this school is not so bad, but to a great degree, it's gonna be like you were in a plastic baggie. And so you're gonna come out into the real world and not know a whole lot about how to do things. Except at this school, we do a couple things for you, and there are things you can do to make that better. But when I came out of law school, I didn't even know, I barely knew what any of you know what discovery is? Yeah, see, I barely knew what it was. They didn't really teach it at the school. And the first job I get, I sit down at my desk, big one, and I'm ready to roll, and I get like a stack of folders this high in my desk, just, and they said, I need you to answer discovery, here's the date. And I said, what's discovery? Literally, I don't know how to do any of this. And my employer said, well, you either have it there on time or you're fired. She walked away. She wouldn't answer my questions, she wouldn't do anything. She said, if you can't do it, you're not the person I want. So I did it. There you were, Adam. There I was off and running. That's what I did. Not that I think you should do as I did, but that's the type of stuff you get. So better to be useful. We'll talk about that later as well. Yeah. So, so let's go ahead and start with a simple concept. Again, stop me whenever you like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And anyway. So we're going to start with briefing today because you already got the IRAC thing, right? Do that. Awesome. And you're learning about rules, right? All right, do that. Awesome. Okay. But one of the other things that you're going to have to learn to do, and this is more in what I'm going to be teaching you, because mostly everything that I teach you has to do with writing. I'm a writing guy here. I'm the academic reading, whatever I am this week. Anyway, so there you go. And so what I'm interested in is that you learn to write. Okay? Now, when you're a lawyer, you're going to write for a number of different people. When you're a law student, you write for different people. Some things you will write for me. Okay? When I write for me, I'm interested in whether you pass the baby bar. All right? When you write for your professors, they're interested in whether you're learning the law. See, I got the much easier job. Very few people realize that. I don't have to teach you law. It's not my job. I could actually sit here and say, I don't want to answer that. That's about the law. I won't do that. I'll tell you what I think it is. But I could. I could just say, go, but, evidence. But I'm going to teach you how to write, okay, which is a little different. Now, the first thing we're going to learn to write is not the baby bar, by the way. Nowhere near ready for that yet. But we are going to learn to write a brief. Okay? Whenever you're doing any writing, the very first thing you have to figure out is who are you writing? Who are you? And who are you writing? Got that? And we'll write that down. Who am I and who am I writing for? If you don't know that, go back to step 0. Try again. Because that will tell you the level, the content, and the tone, all of which are important. Now, if you're writing a brief, who are you? You are a law student, right? You're step 1. And who are you writing for? If you're writing a brief, you're not the right briefs for me. So you're writing for professors. Professors? Yeah, for professors. Just out of curiosity, what do you think professors want to see in your writing? Come on, speak up, say something.
Clarity.
Clarity, excellent. They do like clarity. What else?
That you understand the rules.
Rules, excellent. What else?
Facts.
Yeah, that you have read the case and can actually speak facts. Yes. Or I would actually change that a little bit too. The actual facts you need, okay? The applicable facts, the relevant facts. They love that. Because otherwise, facts, here's the case, right? Well, we don't want that, right? Because they're called what? Briefs. So guess what? Be brief. In my class, I don't let you write more than a page when you brief. What the hell are you going to tell me? you're certainly not telling me things I'm interested in, right? But that's a skill you're going to develop, just so you know. Because right now you're going, well, I don't know what the rule is. Okay, that was something. Okay, yes, there are several different rules in the case all the time. If you want to know which rule is actually the applicable one, do you want to know how to know that? Go to the table of contents and figure out what chapter it's in and figure out what they're talking about. That's the rule that they want you to state. All the other rules are for your purposes of briefing irrelevant. Okay, are we done? That's all you have to do. Period. How many of you spent the first couple of weeks going, I don't know which rule they want? Really, you guys are good. I spent hours doing that when I was, a law student. But then someone told me, they looked at me and they said, what chapter are you in? Negligence. What's the subchapter? Duty? Is there a rule about duty? Maybe. Made a lot of sense after that. So what's rule number 1 of briefing? Table of contents is one of your best friends. They've laid it out for you. Okay, they've done it a million times before. We're not going to reinvent the wheel for you. Right? There's no reason to do that. Trust me, some of you may feel we're already playing hide the pea or hide the ball or whatever. We don't have to do that. Law is really confusing. I don't want to be facetious, but it's much more fun to see you struggle. We don't have to struggle. So there you go. Right? We're actually here to help you with what a concept. See, that was very foreign to me when I was a law student. It's like, I didn't ask my professors for anything. Honestly, they were just beyond useless. Anyways, on purpose too. My school. Anyways, great. So, there you go. Know who you're writing for. Okay? So right now we're going to be law students and we're going to be first year law students. So cut yourself some slack. They know that. Even if they seem rather rough or something like that, they know. Okay? They're just trying to do what they think is right. Okay? There you go. All right. So that's number 1. With that in mind, let's go ahead and look at some of the things that I think are important to briefing and will actually make your life a bit easier as well. And you'll also get the most out of your briefing. Number 1, whenever you brief a case, what do you look at first? I'm just curiosity. What do you guys think you look at? You always look at one thing first. It's even subconscious. You may not even realize it. But what do you actually look at first when you brief a case?
I start in the first paragraph and I try to find what the issue is.
No. Yep.
Who is involved?
Okay, so that's what? That's not bad. You look at what? Come on, think about it. Think. You have to be able to trace yourselves. You see what I'm saying? What's the first thing you look at when you see a case? The very first thing you see. What? What's that called?
Oh, case name.
Case name.
Oh.
Thank you. Which is part of the caption.
I
Is it not
never
so?
looked at that. It's not the first thing I look at.
That's where you have to start from now on.
Goodness.
Get here.
Usually the case names are long and books would have, it's like Fitzgerald, Company Code, Mining Code versus super long.
Okay, well, I mean, here's the funny part though, is I really don't care whether you know the names or not, nor do you. But let's think about this, because what you have there is the case name and the site. You all know about citing already? Citing at all? No? Yes, no? Mm-hmm. Citing is where you would find this case. In other words, if you were like to send it to someone else and say, I want you to look at this case, and let's say the name of the case was Smith versus the United States. Okay, you're gonna send them Smith versus the United States. I mean, there's probably 100,000 million cases with that name. So the site tells you where it is. That is a shared depository of knowledge. Usually it's in a book called a recorder or whatever. And so the site tells you where it is. But the site also tells you an enormous amount of information about who, what, when, where, why, and how. Now, the very first thing you have to realize is that 99.9% of the cases that you are reading are not trial courts. Okay, you all got that so far? These are not trial court transcripts. Okay, trial courts don't make it into briefs. They don't make it into writing in this manner, right? They don't. You just do the trial and you move forward. It's only on appeal that they actually write these decisions to decide whether, in fact, the judge conducted the trial correctly. That's actually the only question on appeal, 99.9% of the time, was did the judge, given the facts as true, did the judge actually conduct the court in a lawyerly, legal manner, or judge-early, whatever you want to call it, right? That's all they really ask, because if they didn't, guess what? That's when they overturn it or whatever else have you. If they did, that's when they say affirmed. Period. So again, not terribly complex of a theory. But keep that in mind, is that you're having people who are looking at a case the second time, not the first. Okay, so that tells you, in that site though, what else do you think you might be able to learn? Okay, first thing in the site, you can learn the name of the defendant and the plaintiff, who are now the appellant, right, the appellee. So you gotta figure that out, right? Doesn't that make sense? Right? Appellants, and who's the appellant, who's the appellant, who's the appellee, whatever words they use, right? I also think it's very useful to figure out who the actual original defendant and the plaintiff was, because then you're figuring out who's got the problem and what do they want, right? I mean, obviously they lost, but who lost? Did the defendant lose and now they're complaining? Did the plaintiff lose and now they're complaining? Who's the one who brought the suit? That would be the appellant. All right, wait. No, the appellee brings the suit, and then they sue the appellant, right? Maybe, I don't know. I forget these things. Forgive me, look it up for yourself. Shut up. It's early. I don't get up in the morning except for you guys, you know that. I never get up in the morning. Never, except for this. See, she's looking like, I paid for this. No, this guy's pretty out there somewhere. Guilty, they say. Okay, gotta figure that out, because one of the things that I always recommend you do is you always want to know the story. Okay, the way to tell me the facts is tell me the story, right? Make it like, you know, anyone can understand it. Don't think about professors. Don't think about anything. When you're doing facts, just think about the story. Very important, actually. We'll talk more about that as your careers go forward. It's always the best trial lawyers are the ones that tell the best stories, period. Because who are you talking to? Who do you really have to convince when you are a lawyer? Other lawyers?
Yourself?
The jury,
Maybe.
the jury or the judge.
The prior fact, right? So if you're talking to a judge, you can talk a little higher, right? But if you're talking to a jury, you know, I mean, again, this is not bad, but a jury of your peers is usually someone who doesn't understand the law. So why are you telling them about law? You want to hear the biggest fallacy in the world about being a lawyer? Whenever a jury says, the judge says, well, you only have to do two things. You just have to be fair, don't have any biases, or if you do, tell us about it. And then, you know, do you promise to follow the law? Yeah, none of them do. Why? Because they don't understand it. Why? Because they're your peers. Do you understand it? How do they? Because someone put it on a screen for 5 minutes? It's nonsense. So how do you impress people like that? How do you impress yourself? What movie do you want to go see? The best story, of course. I used to start all of my opening arguments with, once upon a time, there was a wonderful serial killer who you have to let loose. Better than saying, I'm sure he did it. You mean, you know, but you gotta let him go anyway. Right, okay, Dave. Anyway, so you gotta figure that stuff out, right? Now, you also see this series of numbers and letters and things of that nature. But notice that another thing that you can learn is what level is it at. In other words, it will tell you what appellate court you're in. Are you in a state appellate court? It'll tell you. Are you in a federal appellate court? It'll tell you. Are you in the U.S. Supreme Court? It'll tell you. Do you think that makes a difference that you want to know what court you're in? Yeah. How about what state you're in? You think that makes a difference? Absolutely. Makes a big difference. Figure out what court you're in. And it really is very to your advantage to do that before you do anything else. You see how you're now giving yourself a sort of a catalyst? Now you're sort of all by yourself. Nobody's with you anymore. Now you're starting to figure out what's going on. And you're giving yourself the environmental picture, right? You know, and if it helps you at all, picture yourself being in court, you know, in Kansas, arguing a case about, I don't know, corn. Could be. Anyone from Nebraska?
I'm from Kansas.
Kansas? Ooh, good. Sunflowers. That's cool. Every so often I'll say something about a state. Someone will say, well, you know, I actually come from it. It's like, I actually got into trouble for that. It seems that the only prejudice I seem to have in the world is against people from certain states. Right? Go figure that one out. And I always say that's not possible. I basically hate everybody equally. Therefore, it's by definition not possible. Anyways, with that said, so you want to figure that out as well, right? So what court am I in? What state am I in? Because remember, state laws are different. Let's say that somebody in Kansas makes a decision. Is it binding on California? The answer is no. Let's say that a federal court in California makes a decision. It is binding because they use California law. They're required to use the law of the host state. So things like that. So that is useful sometimes. Laws from other states are interesting. You know, you can write to a judge, hey, you know, judge, maybe we should use the law of Florida in this case. They really got it right. I like this stand my ground stuff. How well do you think that'll go over in California? Really poorly. So because it's not the law here, there's probably a reason. So again, you always have to keep context in mind. Very important, right? Okay, so that you can all learn from what? Looking at what it says. If it says NEB, and it's Nebraska Supreme Court. If it says something like NEB and CT, Nebraska Appellate Court. All these things you could know just by looking at it. Supreme Court, that's all different. Just US. Or sometimes in the alternate, you see that, those both mean Supreme Court. Again, if you're in the Supreme Court, you want to know because they're making decisions for all 50 states. So what they're trying to do is homogenize all the different circuit decisions because they're all saying different things. Because the basic underlying laws say different things. So it's interesting to note that, right? Now, of course, you want to pay a little bit more attention to California because you are going to be practicing in California. However, when you graduate from this school, you can also apply to appear in federal courts in every state. Pretty cool, huh? So if you want to do something like immigration law, you can do it in any state you want. If you want to do something like copyright law, like I used to do, you can do it in any state I want.
Any state, you said? You said any state?
Any state as long as you're in a federal court. Yeah, you can do federal. Matter of fact, federal, if you do certain things like immigration or labor, it's like they even let non-lawyers do it because they need people to do it. So you can actually get what's called a federal representative who's not even a lawyer half the time, but they need people so badly at those levels that, you know, you can almost always find work like that. And if you have it, if you're licensed by the state of California, you can practice federal law in all 50 states. And Guam. And Puerto Rico. I'm thinking about it. So, yeah, and they'll be happy to have you. No problem. Okay. Okay. What else can you learn from just looking at this site? What else do you see in that little thing? Anyone have a book? Feel free to look it up. Yes?
I guess it falls into context and the date as well.
Excellent. Always look at the date. The date is really, really, really important, right? Because when you are doing case law, right, in a court in particular, honestly, nobody really cares about what happened in 1865 unless you're a real property, then they might care. Because we still use some of those laws. But you want the date closest to this, right? because you want to be able to say to the judge, the best way to do it is like, let's say you have a law from 1865. Just say, this is your venerable case. The venerable case of so-and-so, that means it's stood the test of time. That's what it means. Da-da-da. Was followed by your court in 2019 in this case. Therefore, as a practical matter, unless you're going to change the law, Your Honor, why don't you just fall in line with everybody else and go forward this afternoon? Otherwise, I'll see you in appellate court. You think they want that? I don't know.
So when,
But be nice about it. Don't use words like idiot and judge.
so when you use the word venerable, it usually means working cases in that?
Yeah, a venerable case is one that has survived the test of time. So they've usually been around for at least 100 years or so. Or at least 50. I've seen some say that about 50. I mean, sometimes in like real property, you know, that's what I teach. I mean, we go back to 1100 AD because some of our laws that we see today are on the books in England in 1100 AD. We still continue those traditions. But for the most part, most of your cases, you're still looking for mostly newer cases. So when you see something from the 1800s, it's mostly there for some sort of not quite historical lesson, but there's some piece of it that's still left. And it's still the best way to show you that theory. It's still good law. Because remember, in cases, you can have parts of cases overruled, whereas other parts are still good. So again, the part that's still good, how do you know what that is? Go to the table of contents, whatever section you're in, that's what they want you to know. Got it? Okay, so how much have you learned just by actually sitting down for a moment, reading the title, figuring out who they are, figuring out where they were, and figuring out when they were. Now you actually have context, right? Before you do that, you have no context. You're actually just looking at a case as if everybody is the same everywhere for every purpose. This is not true. Okay? And so the more that you realize that, the more you'll realize that trial courts are different than appellate courts. The Supreme Court of the United States is different than an appellate court in California. They have different things that they do. Seems they do the same things, but they don't. I mean, they don't. They're not. If they did, why would you have them? Right? Okay. All right. Any questions about any of that nonsense? Good. Just do it. Get used to doing it. Get used to going to the site, understanding everything you can from it. That way you'll get more, right? Let's see. That looks pretty good. See, there actually is a function, just you hit one button, but it's not coming up, so what can I do? Hey man, I'm at the school that can do that. Pretty good, huh? Yeah. Okay, so moving forward. Number 2 is, just so you know, do not book brief. It's a big mistake. Learn how to write. Learn to figure out how much time it takes you. Learn to figure out how you're going to develop your language. How you're going to relate to other people in writing. It's very important. In the first year, I know they don't have you turn in your briefs. I teach in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year, you turn in your briefs in my classes because I don't allow book briefs. I think it's a complete waste of time, to be honest with you.
What's the book brief?
Just write it in there.
What?
You just write comments in the margins.
Oh, you don't, okay, I see.
I don't.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Well, you can't in my classes. You literally can't. You will fail. You get 10% of your grade for writing your briefs. So.
But can you do it for yourself and then write it?
Oh, yeah. You just can't turn that in.
works
I don't
for me.
let you read out of the book in my classes. Yeah.
Veronica was saying, I think that was her name, she was saying that we have to we should familiarize ourselves with typing online, and that our test taking is going to be online. Should we familiarize ourselves with making briefs online as well, just because that's the copy paste functionality rather than just prepping it out. Okay.
I mean, my bottom line is if you can type. I can't say definitively that when you take the baby bar or the bar, there's a penalty for writing by hand. I can't say that definitively, but I will say that in no way, shape, or form will not ever be an advantage to you. There's no way. And I can tell you that I know many readers, and when we're flipping through books and we come to a handwritten one, you're like 1 inch away from having it ripped up. On top of which, guess what? Do you think that the bar is actually under an obligation to read it if they can't read your writing? The answer is no. They're not required to read it. They used to be, but they changed it. Because what happens was students started to do this. They figured it out that you were required to read it, okay? Otherwise they couldn't fail you, right? So this is what students started to do. In the venerable case, and it's all of a sudden just these illegible stuff, which people were just getting frustrated writing 70 of them. Stop that. Now they can say, I can't read this, 50. Or I can't read this, 0. On the baby bar, you can actually take a 0. Believe it or not, the bar you can't. The bar you can't get below 40. Don't worry, it doesn't help you at all. You get a 40, you fail anyway. It's just a mathematical equation. But on the baby bar, they can give you a 0. And they will if they can't read it. They're under no responsibility to read it. On the other hand, if you type, they cannot grade you down for spelling errors. They cannot grade you down for typing errors. They cannot grade you down for any of that. You might lose some of their confidence if you're not spelling well, things like that. So maybe that 65 becomes a 70, maybe it doesn't. But they can't grade you down for it. Whereas if your writing is illegible, they can't. They don't even have to read it anymore. Because again, students some smart students are fit for everybody, which is the way it always goes, just like life, right? So that's what you're stuck with. Anyway, so yes, book brief. I think they let you do it here in the first year, but again, you might want to ask your professors how they feel about that. All of them should say no, but I can't promise you they will. Right? Also, I'm not the administrative dean, so I won't tell them what to do. Right? Something like that. But anyways, at least in my classes, you will write them down, and I will look at them too. And if they're not right, it's like I will tell you. Okay. So this. Okay. So now, oh goody, let's actually talk about your briefing. But see everything that goes into this, and again, don't short shrift it. Find your method. Okay, always be conscious, always be aware of how you are doing things, and always leave yourself a way to repeat it. If you can't do that, it's virtually useless. Right? I mean, think about what I'm saying. You'll never get better at it, you'll never get faster at it. So you have to become a self-aware student. Okay, so again, but better in the long run, makes it easier on you. Yeah. Right, so, again, briefs are what they are. They usually have the names of the party. They usually tell you about the court opinion came from, and I think these are very important things. They also will include from time to time procedural events. Sometimes they want you to say, what happened in that just means what happened in the lower courts, which is something that you should know. But in my classes, I don't want you to write the procedure. I just assume you know that by the time you're in the second year. But by the first year, you should maybe write it down, just so you always know, okay, this is like, how many times have you done this? It's really a good question because they can become very complex. You're seeing it and going, well, in the lower court, they said this. Of course, in the lower court, they said this. Well, now we got to, but if we don't change the lower court, we can't change the lower. But the lower is slightly, it can get very complex. complex. So figure out how many cases they're talking about, figure out where you're at is, again, very important. Otherwise, you won't really understand what's happening. And again, you may never understand everything that's happening because they're brief. The things you see in books are excerpts, right? They're just a couple of pages. I mean, in con law, it's like they give me 6 pages from a 150-page opinion. You know, and students say, well, how do you know that? It's like, because I read the 150-page opinion, right? But they just refer to it in the cases that all of you have. That's pretty funny. Huh? Sorry, I think it's just me. Yes?
And lower court, it's like the states, it's not the Supreme Court, or what does that mean?
Lower court? Well, the way that the court system works is, you know, let's say that a case, you know, because we have 2 separate, you guys know this stuff, right? Okay, let's do this very quickly, just in case, then I'll feel better. There are 2 court, don't be funny. There are 2 state systems. In the United States, we have 2 sovereigns, and so each sovereign has its own court system. And so most cases, you know, your variety of cases will actually just start in state court in the state trial courts. Okay, that's where the trial is held, right? In California, these are called superior courts. Okay. We did away, there is no such thing as a municipal court anymore in California. We did away with that about 10 years ago. We consolidated it all. So it used to be a municipal court, which was even lower. But now everything is just a superior court. So California is called the superior court. Many other states it's not, by the way. Okay. Then next in California, you have state appellate courts, or courts, actually in California, it's courts of appeal. Not appellate courts, so courts of appeal, and then you have different numbers next to them, depending what area you're in. And then we have the Supreme Court of California, right? So you can move up that entire line. Then, let's just say, for instance, in federal court, you have trial courts as well, which are called district courts. District courts, have you seen that yet? It says, it'll say the federal district courts for Southern, you know, California, or Northern California, or Southern California, or Central California. Those are just the trial courts. Then the appellate courts are called circuit courts. Got it? Okay, what circuit are we? Does anybody know? California. We're in the 9th circuit. Very good. Anyone know how many there are? 13. Because we count DC as well. DC has its own circuit court, but it only does stuff for Congress.
Do you know who the 5th is? Is there a 5th?
Yeah, Texas is in the 5th.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, Texas is in the 5th. Chicago is in the 3rd. Those are the ones that people tend to look at.
How are they, why are they 13? They're by regions?
By region, by area. I won't do it today because it takes too long, but ask me someday to explain to you how we got the name Circuit Court, because it actually comes from England in about 1260. Anyways, I'll tell you all about this. Anyway, so but those are courts of area, just so you know. And then of course we have the United States Supreme Court. So theoretically, you could have a case start here, and if you did start here, you would skip this course, but it can end up here, and it does happen every so often. But you go, you can be to 5 different courts. I actually had a case that did that. Amazing.
So those are like very, very complex cases?
Well, it was a constitutional law case, so it was boundary up there. Well, not the Supreme Court, but it did. Strangely true. By that time, though, I wasn't on the case anymore. I never argued before the Supreme Court. But it eventually went there. Well, things. Anyway, so there you go. We just did the.
So those are the lower courts,
Yeah, lower to higher.
Oh, lower to higher, okay.
Yeah. Although, again, don't just think federal is always better than state. It's not. It's kind of a misconception. So federal is just federal law for the most part. You'll get a lot of that stuff, particularly when you get civil procedure. They'll tell you about all this stuff. But you may as well know now. It's kind of basic, right? So, okay, everyone got that? So you see how important it is to know in torture? I mean, imagine, if you're reading this, just imagine you could have this, or you could have this. And you're reading this brief, and it says, well, in the lower court, huh?
Yeah, but
Or lower courts.
I was very confused when
Yeah.
I was reading.
And you don't know, right? And sometimes they do that. Sometimes judges are very kind, sometimes they're not. I mean, don't you love it when a judge says, the rule that you are going to put in your brief is right here. I mean, sometimes they actually do something like that, but most of them don't. Believe it or not, most judges are terrible writers. Of course, they demand you be William Shakespeare blah, all the time. That's true. But let me give you a hint, never correct the judges. Really bad idea. Although there was one that's, I used to always submit stuff to, and he'd always write back. He'd always confuse your, Y-O-U-R, and you are, Y-O-U-R-E. And so one time I corrected him, and I think I lost that day. I'm pretty sure it's because I corrected it. Can they do that? Oh, yeah. I'm not going to tell you, but you know. Okay, we good on that? Okay. So that's all your procedural stuff. See how much you can learn just by reading those captions and stuff like that. It's amazing.
And that was the facts, right? Procedural facts? That was under when you're reading.
Procedural, that's all procedural facts. Just where is this case being? See, if you know that, it's easier to, you see what I'm saying? Again, you're going to make your life, believe it or not, it sounds like a lot, but if you learn how to do that, it makes reading cases much easier. And also, there's just some things that will never be in there. You know how you can really waste your time in law school reading for stuff that's not there? Think about what I just said. You can spend an enormous amount of time just sitting there looking for something that's not even there. Do you think you should avoid that? I probably avoid that. Yeah. Did I have a question? Did I see it?
Just a question. So, do you think that it's beneficial to learn where the 13th and 14th?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. If you guys ever want something in this class, just let me know. I've taught every class at this school. Not at this school, but I taught it at one time or another. So, and I'm also a constitutional law professor, and I'm also a historian of not terrible merit. So, but I am.
Have you dealt with federal courts?
Yes. Fast. You have anything to say? No. Good. Get out. Okay.
All that online stuff too, huh?
Yeah. Well, now they.
All the way that the papers have to be,
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah. But they're just like fast. There's this one judge that I had to appear in front of a couple of times, and I named Judge Otero, and I thought he hated me. I mean, I thought he was throwing me out of his court every time. It came out later he really liked me because I always just said, "No, Your Honor, it's all in my papers." Then get out! And then I found out later, better than saying, "Well, Your Honor, I did leave out." Why isn't it in your papers? Fast. Get in, get out.
it changes
See you.
quick on
Yeah, just,
electronic stuff.
yeah, just get in, get out. Check your back. No knife. Great. Okay. Anyway, so, right. Okay, so your brief should start with the facts. But try to make your facts brief. And why I say that is the facts in and of themselves aren't that important. Find a way to do two things. Tell the story of the relevant facts. That's the two-step process. Tell me the story using relevant facts. In other words, don't just repeat it to me. Who cares? How do you know what the relevant facts are? Table of contents. Around the chapter. That's what I want to see. So again, if you're in tort class and you're doing negligence and it says intent, guess what I want to see? Got it? That's what I want to see. You will save me an enormous amount of grief if I ever look at your work, and your professors will appreciate that. Got it? Because that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for you to explain everything back to us, because we've all read the case already. Think about someone who's never read it, who basically is not a lawyer. Just tell me what's going on, just give me the story, right? Some kind of story. It can be very brief too. And then just tell me why this matters in this case. Like, and he was a policeman. Therefore, he had a pre-existing duty. Because I pre-existing duties section, right? It's really like that, yeah. When I was in law school, I got my briefs down to this. My professors found it. Because that was it. That's all I needed to show here. And they go, as long as it's right, what can they do, right? But that's not that big a deal. Most of the double students can do that. If we went more than a half a page on a brief, we freaked out. That's not my school. It's like, why are you going past half a page? So-and-so doesn't care. As long as it's right, because they were so they look at it. Okay, so we want those facts, right? When in doubt, if you want to make your briefs shorter, cut down the facts. That's almost always the longest part that you don't do. So again, just think to yourself, do I really need to tell someone? Does it really matter how this case was decided? A lot of facts are interesting, but do they really matter? So again, I'm trying to save you guys time. So that would be facts. Okay, I never finish on time. You know that, right? So just so you know, it may happen someday, but we'll get you out of it. So, and we'll pick up if you have more questions next week. So just remember to ask questions. Ask now. I can't stress that enough. So no question is too stupid, right? I will give you a stupid answer. That's your worst case scenario. Think about it. It's a pretty good deal. I wish someone would answer like questions if he does it anyway. Okay, so we have our facts, right? Then the next thing you want to do is an issue. Okay, but again, pick the relevant issue. Okay, don't write every issue. Just pick the relevant one. How do you know what the issue is? Look for words like whether. Look for words like is, and then look for that. How do you know? Strangely enough, I don't know why, but justices are required to use English. God knows why. You can't read it anyway, because that's not one advantage in life. Those are the things that tell you it's an issue. Right? That's how they start. Or if they're very kind, they say the issue in this case is, but be warned, sometimes they say that and it's not for your purposes. So be careful, they will do that. Again, you have to think to yourself, reading a tort book and doing intentional torts. I know I have intent and act and causation. Between the two, that results in this tort. There, you can go home now. You've heard everything you need to know about torts. If you could fill this in, you're done. There is nothing your tort professors can teach you outside of that except defense. There, now you know absolutely, positively everything they're going to teach you. I guarantee it. Write that down. Go ahead, write that down, and then every class look at it and tell me if they teach you anything that doesn't fit into one I just told you. Anything that doesn't fit in one of those categories. And the answer is it doesn't exist. That's how you know it, right?
What's number 3? I can't picture right.
Oh, causation. In other words, it has to be that act with that intent to create that intentional tort. Otherwise, it might be a criminal act because you have different intent, right? In case you ever wondered already, what's the difference between, like, for instance, battery for criminal matters and battery for
intention?
Hmm?
The intention?
In one, you had criminal intent. You know, you hit him, you tried to kill him. And the other one, you had tortious intent, which means what? Means not evil, there's no malice involved, but you knew essentially that hitting someone with a rock was gonna cause harm, or if you didn't know, then you're being so reckless with an act that you could have pretty much assumed would have anyway, even though you never thought that far. Don't you love torts? I hated torts in high school. It's a pretty good class here, though, I have to say. Give those guys a lot of credit. Boy, you guys learned a lot about torts here. Not like your other classes are bad, but I've never quite seen it quite so much. Our class was like, you get it? Somebody hit the car. Oh, yeah. Right. Do they get some money? Yeah. Uh-huh. Anyway, so that's what you're going to learn. Hey, you want me to do it real quick for you for criminal law?
Sure, yes, please.
You ready? Okay, I'm done. I told you there's no difference. Except the intent. It's true. You'll see that. When you're in criminal law, pay attention to intent. That's the key, I think, in getting that class. Everything else is kind of just acts, and we all know acts when you see that. And then the defensives can be interesting because intent is quite a multifaceted issue. Let's see, rule. Okay, you know the act. Okay, analysis. The only thing I can say is in your analysis, make sure you're using actual facts. When possible, just copy them out of the book. Okay, that's my only advice for you today. Because your analysis, you're going to have to learn a little bit how to analyze. But try to use the actual facts. Those are the best analysis. And never, particularly in my class, if I see it, it's bad news. Never say if. Never. If is not relevant in law. Because you'll say, well, it would be a tort if it's not. Don't do that. You're making up facts. Making up facts in a court can actually get you disbarred. You can't do that. You have to work with what you've got. Every case is not perfect. Trust me. If you ever think you get a perfect case, you're wrong, you're going to lose. You miss something. I guarantee it. And they'll catch it on the other side, so don't do that. So never say if, never say I think, never say if. Just take those out, and you'll be way, way, way better off. Got it? Okay, it's not about possibilities, it's about what is, right? Critical thinking, remember that? Right, remember to put this down in your notes too. Look it up, find out what it is. You've been doing it for 4 years. You really want to not know? Critical thinking.
Oh, critical.
Figure out what it is. That's what you're going to be doing for 4 years. Learning to think.
And analysis, sorry,
And that's just how to do the court book.
when you do analysis, do you,
You imagine what you're doing
the
is you're,
facts, you,
in analysis, you're taking the facts and telling them why it. In essence, what you're doing in analysis is you're taking the facts and you're applying it to some element of the rule that explains why it answers the issue.
so you,
That would be my best way to explain it to you. It's not maybe. But again, that's, you'll see. But that takes a little time. But don't worry about that for today. Let that flow. That's something you'll just get used to. And that's just a matter of the important part that you learn to take relevant facts. That's all. Because when you're using irrelevant facts, all of a sudden you're going off and using words like what? If. Don't do that. See what I'm saying? Don't say if. You find yourself using if, say That's bad. The word you can use over and over and over, if you so desire, is because. Because he hit him with a rock, with intent, boom, see what I'm saying? Because this is what happened, this is what he or she was thinking, that's what happened. If he threw a rock at him, it would have been battery. This is nonsense, you see what I'm saying? You know, I mean, and how would you do a brief anyways? Because then your answer would have to be, if it was, right, and then you'd have to do it for the whole book. Okay, it's not this because nobody kidnapped anyone. It's not this because no, that's nonsense. Just tell me what it is, right? He killed him. There's a dead body. Okay, that's a what? It's an act. A fact, that's an act. He premeditated it with malice. What's that? First degree murder. He killed him at a bar because he was drunk. Second degree murder. He didn't think about it beforehand. He came home and he found his lover in bed with his lovers, and he killed them both, and now he feels great about it, but he's sorry. Voluntary manslaughter. It's all about what? Dead body, right? What changed? Intent. So everything that changed. The connection of the two came together to cause that crime. That's criminal law. Go home. That's all you need to know. Seriously. If you can understand what I'm saying today, that's all you need to know. All you need to do is apply it. So you gotta learn the tools, of course. You know, I can't tell you what all the elements are. Now you know why it's important to learn your rules. That's why we're getting with those up front. Without the rules, you can't do anything I just said. All right? Last but not least, because that's how I do it. And by the way, your conclusion, just tell me what the court did, right? And that's the least important part because they need to reverse or confirmed or they did something. Right? Last but not least, I give you one more little, again, survival tip. Does it surprise you that when I was in kindergarten, I loved finger painting? No. Does it surprise you that my undergraduate degree is in fine art? I was a painter at UCLA. I only know of one other lawyer who ever had a fine art degree.
I have a fine art degree.
Do you really?
That's why I did.
Nice. We rule.
Yeah. No, and I'm super envious of you getting to do all this. I want to get up there and touch it.
Well, see, I learned how to paint and draw as a student and stuff like that. But as a lawyer, I learned what's really important. I learned the secret.
Mm-hmm.
Copyright 2000. Now I'm making money. Up to then, what was I doing? Finger painting. I don't know about you, but I didn't want to play the starving artist. So I got the hell out of that.
Well, I feel like there's more power to fight the system in the law than there is in art.
That is so.
So yeah.
Unless you're John Lennon. But that's about it.
Yeah, but it's
No, I
highly
totally
unlikely
agree.
I would be that famous.
Yeah.
But it's not that good.
Totally agree with you. Been there, done that. Very good. Okay, contracts. All right, let me give you a hint about contracts. Okay. Every contract that was ever written is capable of 4 stages. 4 stages, period. End of story. Ready? You'll see this later. Just keep it in mind for now. Write this down. Okay. The first thing you're going to have to do at this school, it's a very simple chart I'm going to give you. I'm just going to give you the chart. If you have questions, please feel free to ask me about it, but I want you to think about it for now. Okay, we teach you 2 types of law in contracts. We teach you common law and UCC, right? Is that so? Okay, so the first thing you have to figure out is what? What it is. You have to figure that out. Okay. Once you figure that out, your first job is to figure out, was a contract formed? You can have a contract, quote unquote, of 10,000 pages, but if it doesn't have the formational elements and offer acceptance consideration, lack of formational defenses, the court will throw it out. I have seen a 10,000 page contract thrown out because it lacked consideration. You got it. You don't belong in the court. Go away. Leave me alone. I'm going golfing. So then you have to figure out whether there's any defenses. Once you figure that out, go on and what do you think you do once the contract is actually formed? What do? You do what you said you were going to do. It's called performance. Figure out whether the contract was performed or not. Did they do what they said they were going to do in a timely manner? Yes or no? If no, then there's either a reason it's a breach, right? Or there's a defense. This is very logical stuff. Anything short of complete performance is called a what? Technically under the law. Breach. Breach. Very good. So figure out whether anything under the law is a breach. That's all. You break this down further, but I'm not going to give you for today. Unless there's a defense. Get that? Unless you figure out there's a breach, then you get a
Reward? Yeah.
okay. Unless there's a defense for some reason. You don't want to reward it. And there's really no defenses to remedies, but there is mitigation. You have to keep that in mind. All damages must be mitigated. You don't mitigate them, you don't get them. Right? When you get the remedies, you're going to have damages and equitable. Okay? Got it? And you will learn about one other thing. Okay? You'll learn about, again, I'm just going to put this up here, just don't forget it. Anticipatory repudiation. See this later, it comes in between. That's why I was put it in a circle.
In between performance and breach?
And then you will learn one more thing. And it's sort of a separate box all by itself, because it's the really weird part of contracts that really shouldn't exist regulated. It's called third-party beneficiaries. That's it. That's all they're going to teach you. Period. End of story. Everything you will learn in your first year will fit into one of those categories.
What is the AR again?
Anticipatory repudiation. Short version is, let's say somebody tells you that in 2 weeks, you have a contract that's due for performance in 2 weeks, got it? And they tell you, I absolutely positively am not going to perform. I found someone else to do it cheaper, I can pay you off, but still haven't done it, haven't done better, I'm not performing. I'm going to sue you. Should I wait 2 weeks or should I sue you right there? The hell do I have to wait 2 weeks for? You unequivocally told me that you're not going to perform. I got stuff to do, you know what I'm saying? So let's sue today. That's what it does. You'll see. It'll drive you crazy when you get to it. You go, why do we do that? It's business, it's economics. Who wants people waiting 2 weeks to find out that, yeah, you weren't lying? Think about that in the world. How would that work? It's crazy. So we do that. Okay.
May I ask a quick question?
No. Yeah.
As I read this and I've heard it come up before, and I'm sorry if I don't know what it is, but black letter law. Can you just briefly tell me what that means relative to these 3 fees?
Black letter law is the actual words of the statute itself. This is a complete match, right? In other words, under the black letters of this law, this would be a prohibited activity.
So we're stating the statute in this entire.
Exactly, probably. Thank you. Yeah, because otherwise you may infer things from statutes, which is also fine. But black letter law is black letter law. It's just, it says thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not kill. The inferences come with
It was called black letter law because it was written in blacking, right?
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Right, although most of it was written in a couple of tablets, so we don't call it tablet laws. Alright, yeah.
And this black letter law is a compilation of rules essentially derived from cases, but it is, or is it?
Well, rules come first, although cases can change them. But what case law really does is it helps explain rules to the degree that sometimes the actual rules do change because they become,
Black letter law is just the statute, right, written by the legislature. Yeah.
But black letter goes to, case law really just explains what the legislature said or what they. It's funny because you read it sometimes and they'll say like, well, legislature, in your notes you said this, but we knew you really meant this because that would be unconstitutional. No, I should change. That's like, which you're really not supposed to do, but they do. All right, here's one of our graduates, one of our superstars. You're out there in the real world doing law right now.
You guys will get to hear my story in a little bit.
That's all I'm gonna say.
This will be fun sitting in on you.
I'm done. All right, okay, any more questions? All right, last thing last, and this is it. The easiest way to get me to answer a question is to email it to me. I will answer you. But be warned, all questions are answered. Sometimes it's yes. It's no.
You're keeping these people overtime, is that the idea?
No, they're keeping me over.
That's what it is, well, that's good. Ask him all you can, he's our secret weapon.
I keep hearing that from everybody.
Yeah?
It's between the second and third grade. That's my secret.
Work. So, okay, I won't bother you, but lunchtime, you've got now until noon, so you've got 20 minutes.
Thank you. They got my food.
Thank you.
Yeah, there, I thought you were yeah. Yeah, did I say right?
Well, the good news is that I can always like it learned. Otherwise,
Seems to be the most important thing.
well, I'm just trying to, at this point, with first year students, I always think survival. It's like, just get their.
I was thinking that right the second. I thought they're all still here after the first week.
Well, a couple of them are giving me the look, you know, like, oh my God, this guy's a man. I'm not really sure I should take any attention whatsoever. I told them that wasn't their worst bet.
Oh.